Chapter 1883. On the bloody battlefield, Noah and Chow Chow ignored everything around them and looked at each other in the air. However, the two of them behaved completely differently. Noah looked at Chow Chow with cold eyes. Chow Chow's gaze towards Noah was filled with delight. In the next second, Chow Chow's line of sight suddenly moved down and turned to look at the demon slayer and heavenly sword in Noah's hands. He did not hide his curiosity as he asked. He didn't hide his curiosity and asked, "Can you tell me where your swords came from?" Noah did not pay attention to Chow Chow's monologue. His eyes were fixed on Chow Chow. The divine might in his body surged violently and poured into the holy sword and divine blade. Clang! The silver holy sword and the platinum heavenly sword shone brightly. It was as if Noah was holding on to two rays of light. Under the boundless light, he kept walking in the direction of Chow Chow. Noah didn't want to waste any more time talking to Chow Chow. Chow Chow naturally understood this as well. The holy spear on his shoulder lowered slightly. "I thought I had studied you thoroughly, but I didn't expect you to use an unknown powerful weapon. Also, your ability to neutralize Samuel's power is very mysterious. I really don't want to fight you under such circumstances." Despite saying so, the corners of Chow Chow's mouth couldn't help but curl upwards, as if he was expressing his true feelings. However, it's human nature to be excited in the face of the unknown. "Let me see how mysterious you are in battle." After that, Chow Chow pointed the holy spear in his hand at Noah. Balance breaker. The holy spear of Godslayer shone. The flash of light turned into a round wheel that emitted holy waves and appeared behind Chow Chow. On the outline of the round wheel, 7 bowling ball-sized spheres appeared abruptly. They surrounded Chow Chow and floated in the air. Noah suddenly stopped in his tracks and his eyes began to ripple. Is that the balance breaker of the most powerful godly destruction tool? Isn't it a little too calm? Whether it was Noah or Wally, when they used the balance breaker, it caused a huge commotion. However, Chow Chow's balance breaker was like the full moon at night, silently rising into the night sky. It was so calm that it felt strange. Noah's intuition told him that balance breaker was definitely not as calm and simple as it looked on the surface. The next moment, his intuition was confirmed. "Let me show you my 7 treasures." Chow Chow raised the holy spear that didn't change at all. With just this action, one of the 7 spheres floating around him suddenly floated to Chow Chow's front and flew into his hand. Luan Bao. Following Chow Chow's shout, the sphere in Chow Chow's hand suddenly trembled. Wong! A burst of invisible fluctuations suddenly shook the space, like a wave, instantly covering the surroundings. It was also at this moment that the invisible ripples began to surge violently. Then in Noah's hands, the brilliance of the elven devices named Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword of Salvation suddenly dimmed. Oh! Noah couldn't help but be surprised. What? Chow Chow was also surprised. Obviously, the abnormality of the Holy Sword and Heavenly Sword was beyond their expectations. At this moment, Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. "Master, the power of that holy spear is interfering with us." Interfering? Noah looked at Chow Chow with a terrifying look in his eyes. "What did you do?" The one who answered Noah's question was not Chow Chow but Wally, who fell from the sky. "That's the ability of Chow Chow's forbidden hand." Wally stared at the 7 spheres around Chow Chow and said in a deep voice, "Chow Chow's forbidden hand can use the ability called the 7 treasures, which are the 7 spheres. Each sphere represents an ability. The so-called 7 treasures are 7 completely different abilities." 7. Noah was really surprised. Although divine artifacts all had unique abilities, most divine artifacts only had one type of ability. Only God Annihilation artifacts could have more than 2 types of abilities. For example, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear can multiply and transfer. As for White Dragon Emperor's light wings, Divine Dividing, it reduced the absorption by half. But Chow Chow's forbidden hand can have 7 abilities? That's simply unheard of. So, that forbidden hand is not the original forbidden hand of the Holy Spear. Wally said, "That's a subspecies of forbidden hand. Every divine artifact has its own forbidden hand. As long as the conditions are met, the wielder will be able to obtain the power of the forbidden hand and increase the power of the divine artifact by several times. However, divine artifacts can also change and evolve according to the wielder's thoughts, becoming stronger and stronger. If the original forbidden hand of the divine artifact was not suitable for the wielder, then a brand new forbidden hand would be born or developed. That is a subspecies of forbidden hand, different from the original forbidden hand of the divine artifact, a new type of forbidden hand. The original forbidden hand of the holy spear is not suitable for me, so I developed this subspecies of forbidden hand and obtained the ability called the Seven Treasures. Cao Cao raised the sphere in his hand. This is one of the 7 treasures, the Luan treasure. It has the ability to destroy weapons, starting from the strongest weapon within its range. Originally, I was going to use it to destroy Arthur's Holy King sword, but after seeing the power of the sword in your hand, I felt that the Luan treasure should first destroy your sword. Facts have proven that your sword is stronger than the strongest holy sword, but it's a bit too strong. The Luan treasure's ability can only suppress it to a certain extent, but it can't destroy it. This is the forbidden hand of the strongest divine artifact. Generally speaking, there shouldn't be any weapon that can't be destroyed. Unfortunately, Noah's elven device is not an ordinary weapon. Even the forbidden hand of the strongest divine artifact can't destroy it. However, just as Cao Cao said, although the Luan treasure can't destroy Aster and Athena, it can suppress the elven device's power to a certain extent. Other than the Luan treasure, my forbidden hand has 6 other abilities. However, one of them can't be effective against you, so I'll use it on someone else. Cao Cao raised his hand. Female treasure. One of the spheres floating around Cao Cao suddenly trembled and shot out. It streaked across the sky at an extremely fast speed, nimbly dodging the grim reapers and demonic beasts, and rushed to the front of a person. That person was He Gu. Be careful. Wally couldn't help but shout. Before that, He Gu seemed to have sensed Cao Cao's attack by relying on the flow of qi. Without any hesitation, he waved his long sleeves, causing a fog to envelop him, and his body became illusory. However, at the same time, the sphere also bloomed with a dazzling light. The light directly enveloped He Gu, causing He Ji's illusory body to gradually solidify. Shrouded in the light, He Gu struggled with great difficulty, unable to move his body. It's useless. The female treasure is able to completely seal the power of the women in the field for a certain period of time, starting from the strongest one, and it can't be avoided. Of course, it's useless against men. Cao Cao curled his lips and smiled, raising a hand. Then what kind of ability should I use next? As soon as he finished speaking, the spheres surrounding Cao Cao suddenly trembled and shot out, rushing in the direction of Noah and Wally. Noah's footsteps suddenly staggered, but instead of retreating, he moved forward. Violent divine power poured into the holy sword and divine saber, causing the holy sword and divine saber to shine again. The light was many times weaker than the holy sword and divine saber from before. However, Noah was still like an arrow that left the bow, rushing forward in the faint sound of the air breaking. On the way, Noah avoided all the spheres, allowing Noah to rush in the direction of Cao Cao, who was behind him. Although he didn't know what other abilities Cao Cao would use, those abilities were all based on the spheres. Therefore, Noah only needed to go straight for Cao Cao, who no longer had any spheres around him. Chapter 1884. Clang. The light shining on the demon slayer and heavenly sword was extremely weak, proving that Luan Bao's ability was still working. Luan Bao's ability was able to destroy Aster and Athena, who had turned into elven devices. In order to resist such power, both Aster and Athena had to use their own power to resist, causing the amount of power they could provide to Noah was much less. However, Noah was still pouring a steady stream of divine might into the holy sword and heavenly sword, activating the power of the 2 highest grade elven devices. Absolute sword technique. Initial form purple lightning. The extremely fast thrust allowed Noah to dash out like lightning, almost impossible to catch with the naked eye. However, because the power provided by the elven devices decreased, Cao Cao was still able to catch sight of Noah's figure. He's coming straight for me? Did he see through my weakness again? Cao Cao was not surprised but delighted. You are indeed the best human. Noah Dole. Cao Cao, who was shouting, did not dodge Noah's attack. Poochie. In the next moment, the silver holy sword and platinum heavenly sword pierced through Cao Cao's body, causing a clear tearing sound to reverberate in the surroundings. However, Noah's expression did not have the slightest trace of joy. Instead, his gaze sharpened as he released the divine might gathered under his feet and flashed away like a phantom. Almost at the same time, another Chow Chow suddenly appeared in front of the Chow Chow who was pierced through by the holy sword and heavenly sword. The holy spear in his hand was like a flash of light as it pierced through Noah's original position and pierced through the other Chow Chow. Bang! Amidst the muffled explosion, the holy spear that killed the Chow Chow who was pierced through by the holy sword and heavenly sword suddenly exploded. Oh! Chow Chow calmly withdrew his holy spear. You didn't succeed? TSK. Noah was speechless. Doppelganger and teleportation? As expected of you to be able to see through it so quickly. Chow Chow smiled cheerfully and summoned 2 spheres. Ma Bao can move himself and his enemies at will. Scholar Bao can create multiple clones. After using Forbidden Hand, I had activated their abilities. I left a doppelganger at the original location and then moved it to another location. When you attack me, I will move back and decide the victor with 1 strike. That is my plan. Chow Chow revealed a fearless smile. That's because I believe that you'll definitely be able to see through my weakness and directly ignore the 7 treasures to attack me. Not only was this guy's ability to restrain others, but his thinking was also so meticulous. He had completely combined strength and wisdom in a battle. It was really troublesome. No wonder even Wally was forced to use Tyrannosaurus. Undoubtedly, Chow Chow was only a human, but he relied on the power of the strongest god's destruction tool, and his own training and thinking to reach such a level. I'm afraid that in this world no human could be stronger than Chow Chow, right? An extremely skilled opponent like Chow Chow, who had a variety of abilities and meticulous thinking, was really too difficult to deal with. Although he didn't ask Wally whether he had won against Chow Chow after using Tyrannosaurus, Noah already knew the result without asking. There was no doubt that after using Tyrannosaurus, Wally would never lose to Chow Chow, but he still couldn't win against Chow Chow. After all, although Tyrannosaurus was very powerful and could allow Wally to instantly obtain the power of a Rubian before it was sealed, reaching the level of the Sky Dragon and contending with the top 10 masters in the world, it was only power at best. Coupled with the extremely serious consumption, even if Wally used Tyrannosaurus, there was still a gap between him and the top 10 masters in the world. If it weren't for this, Wally wouldn't have been so easily defeated by Noah, who had just become a godslayer not long ago. However, even so, Wally, who used Tyrannosaurus, was definitely not weaker than a god like Loki. It was definitely not a problem for him to reach 4 digits. The only problem was that the consumption was too high and the duration was too short. Therefore, in Noah's opinion, without understanding all the abilities of Chow Chow's 7 treasures, Wally should have been delayed by Chow Chow until the duration of Tyrannosaurus was over. It was no wonder that Chow Chow could lead the heroes faction and stand above the major factions in the group of disasters, and contend with the descendants of the old Demon King faction. Both Wally and Black Song had a very high opinion of Chow Chow, and even reminded Noah more than once to be careful of him. It was not unreasonable. Hugh! At that moment, Noah took a deep breath and calmly said, Aster, Athena, you two should rest for a while. Both Aster and Athena did not respond. However, the holy sword and the divine blade suddenly turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared in Noah's hand. Seeing this scene, Chow Chow raised his eyebrows. However, before Chow Chow could speak, Noah calmly said, Chow Chow, you didn't let your title as the strongest god's extermination tool go to waste. You've already unleashed the power of that spear to the fullest. You've even developed a subspecies of Forbidden Hand. I now understand why Wally thinks you're the strongest existence among humans. To be able to receive such a high evaluation from you, it is truly an honor. Chow Chow narrowed his eyes. Without batting an eyelid, he summoned the 7 spheres to his side. But, didn't you also kill a god as a human? So, since you have fully demonstrated your ability, it is about time for me to show you my full strength. Noah looked directly at Chow Chow. My current full strength. Your current full strength? Chow Chow was stunned. However, in the next moment, Chow Chow's eyes suddenly focused. Because with a flash, a crimson gauntlet appeared in Noah's hand. Drake, Noah said calmly. Is that okay? No problem. Drake's voice sounded from the jade in the gauntlet. Samuel is no longer here, and I have recovered. You can use your current full strength as much as you want. Partner. Hearing this, Noah suddenly smiled and raised the gauntlet in his hand high up. In the next moment, the divine aura running wildly in Noah's body was converted into mana and poured into the crimson gauntlet. Forbidden Hand, Balance Breaker. The crimson gauntlet suddenly bloomed with an unprecedentedly dazzling light, setting off waves of crimson waves that turned into visible air waves and spread out in all directions like a violent wind. Seeing this, Chow Chow's expression became serious. Wally, who was watching from the side, mumbled, "Is he finally going to use that forbidden hand?" When the demons, angels, and fallen angels formed a peace treaty, Wally, as a member of the disaster group, launched an attack on the three major forces. At that time, the one who faced Wally was Noah. Wally had never forgotten Noah's forbidden hand at that time. It should be said that everyone who saw Noah use forbidden hand at that time did not forget that scene. The crimson airwave shook the air and covered Noah's body amidst the tremors. The crimson gauntlet in Noah's hand disintegrated little by little like illusory scales and merged with the crimson airwaves. Bang! The surging airwaves shook Noah's body, stirring up waves of sand and dust, causing the ground to tremble slightly. As if a crimson dragon shadow covered Noah's body, Noah, who was surrounded by crimson airwaves, opened his eyes and looked at Chow Chow. Meeting Noah's gaze, Chow Chow's hand holding the holy spear tightened bit by bit. As expected, your forbidden hand is also a subspecies? The second heavenly dragon's forbidden hand was originally a materialized armor. However, in the past, because Noah's forbidden hand had merged with the Dragon Emperor's chi scales, it had turned into a set of chi armor instead of a physical armor. Now, with the reappearance of the artifact, the forbidden hand of the gauntlet once again reappeared as an airwave. Different from the original forbidden hand, Noah's forbidden hand was naturally a subspecies of forbidden hand. We're both users of the subspecies forbidden hand. Is your 7 treasures more powerful than my chi armor? Let's see. Chapter 1885. Boost, 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 boost. When the disorderly voices rang out in succession from the crimson dragon silhouette on Noah's body, Noah's aura skyrocketed like a volcanic eruption, causing the crimson airwaves around him to rise like flames. Chow Chow's expression changed slightly. He swung the holy spear in his hand. The light wheel and the 7 spheres behind him shone brightly. However, at this moment, Chow Chow felt an extraordinary sense of crisis in his heart. That sense of crisis caused Chow Chow's pupils to shrink. Without hesitation, he summoned a sphere. Xiang Bao. Immediately, Chow Chow's body floated up and soared into the sky. Xiang Bao was a very ordinary but practical flying ability. The instant Chow Chow's figure soared into the sky, a crimson figure streaked across the sky, instantly arriving at Chow Chow's original location. Bang! The fist covered by the red scales was like a meteorite, heavily bombarding the ground where Chow Chow was originally standing. The ground was smashed into pieces, as if it was collapsing, constantly sinking. In the blink of an eye, a huge crater with a diameter of several hundred meters appeared on the ground, causing a violent shockwave and a thick cloud of dust to sweep out in all directions. The demonic beasts and grim reapers that were affected by the violent impact were all blasted away, like pieces of paper, heavily smashing into the surrounding ground. Immediately, everyone in Wally's team, including Wally, ran away in panic. Meanwhile, Chow Chow, who had flown into the sky, looked down at the scene that resembled a meteor crashing into Earth. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. However, the sense of crisis in Chow Chow's heart did not decrease but instead increased. Buzz! In an instant, from the crater that was shaking violently and filled with sand and dust, a magical light beam that could pierce through heaven and earth suddenly burst out, shaking the air. Under the trembling of the air, the light beam shot up to the sky and violently shot towards Chow Chow. That magical light beam had obviously undergone a lot of amplification. It was incomparably huge, with a diameter of hundreds of meters. Chow Chow, who was less than 2 meters tall, was like a tiny speck of sand in front of it. His vision was completely filled by that terrifying light beam. Jewel! Chow Chow shouted. A sphere suddenly appeared in front of him. The sphere twisted and turned into a vortex, which continued to expand. The huge light beam that soared into the sky directly fell into the vortex, and was absorbed by the vortex. Jewel! the ability to absorb the enemy's attack and freely reflect the attack. With this ability, Chow Chow could transfer the attack to another place, or return it to its owner. At this moment, Chow Chow chose to reflect it. Therefore, in the huge vortex, the magical light beam that had just been absorbed suddenly shot out from the sky. It streaked across the sky at a speed faster than when it came, and directly rushed toward the crater on the ground. Boost, 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 boost. However, in the crater that was still shaking violently and filled with thick sand and dust, a series of disorderly voices rang out once again and entered Chow Chow's ears. Shortly after, Chow Chow's expression changed abruptly. A beam of light that was even larger than the one that was deflected by him blasted away the violent impact and the dense sand and dust. Once again, it soared into the sky and collided with the beam of light that was descending from the sky. Boom! In the deafening roar, the two light beams fiercely collided in midair, stirring up an astonishingly strong light and a terrifying impact that surged in all directions like a wave. The aftermath not only scattered the clouds in the sky, but also engulfed the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts one by one. In the screams and roars of the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts, they were annihilated one by one, leaving no trace behind. Huh! Chow Chow, who was some distance away from the center of the impact, was also affected. He was fiercely blown away by the violent impact. He could only unfold the jewel sphere in front of him and turn it into a vortex to constantly absorb the impact and avoid being hurt. Chow Chow's strength lay in his endless means, superb skills, and agile and meticulous thinking. In terms of defense, he was a complete mess. If Chow Chow were to be hit by the shockwaves, he would be done for. Chow Chow couldn't help but shudder when he sensed the terrifying shockwaves surging toward him. Is that the power of the combination of the God Slayer and the God's Destruction gear? Is that the power of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gears subspecies Forbidden Hand? Terrifying. Truly too terrifying. After using Forbidden Hand, Noah's pressure on Chow Chow was no less than Wally using T-Rex. No, compared to Wally, Noah is undoubtedly more terrifying. When facing Wally, Chow Chow was able to rely on his opponent's unfamiliarity with the 7 abilities of his Forbidden Hand to stall for time. He was able to endure the duration of T-Rex and fight Wally to a draw. However, Noah had only used Forbidden Hand and not Tyrannosaurus. Although Forbidden Hand would also consume a certain amount of energy, even Wally could maintain Forbidden Hand for a month. Chow Chow believed that Noah's Forbidden Hand could only be longer than Wally's Forbidden Hand. In other words, Chow Chow's current opponent was like Wally using T-Rex with no restrictions and no consumption. Stalling for time was akin to courting death. However, such a powerful Forbidden Hand must have a certain degree of weakness. Chow Chow's eyes flashed with madness. As long as I can rely on the 7 treasures to stall for time, I will definitely be able to find the weakness of that subspecies Forbidden Hand. That's right, Noah's Forbidden Hand does indeed have a weakness. That is, its consumption is frightening. Even if a god were to use it, they would die suddenly. Unfortunately, that weakness had no effect on Noah, who had the 3rd perpetual motion machine at all. Whoosh! In the next second, with a sharp piercing sound, a crimson figure swept through the entire space like a meteor and shot straight toward Chow Chow's direction. Chow Chow's heart suddenly shook. He quickly summoned Ma Bao's sphere to his side and used his teleportation ability to instantly disappear. However, the crimson meteor that soared into the sky also fiercely changed direction at an astonishing speed. Chow Chow's figure just happened to appear there. The crimson meteor arrived in front of Chow Chow and imprinted Noah's figure into Chow Chow's eyes. The teleportation ability is indeed very powerful. However, as long as I concentrate and sense the movement of the surrounding space, I will be able to find you. Noah's voice clearly entered Chow Chow's ears, causing Chow Chow's heart to tremble violently. Previously, I was distracted by your Forbidden Hand. However, it does not mean that the same method will work again, Chow Chow. After saying that, a fist carrying a surging crimson airwave and terrifying whistling wind suddenly blasted out. Amidst the ear-piercing explosion, it heavily bombarded Chow Chow. At this moment, an unprecedented strong sense of crisis screamed in Chow Chow's heart. For Chow Chow, whose defense was too weak, Noah's full-strength attack in the Forbidden Hand state was enough to make him explode instantly. Ma Bao's teleportation ability was useless against Noah. The jewelry's absorption ability was used to absorb the aftermath of the impact. If he used it now, he would only be shocked to death by the aftermath of the impact. Zhu Shibao's doppelganger ability had been seen through by Noah from the beginning. It could not reverse the situation at all. Luan Bao and Woman Bao, which were used against weapons and women, were useless against Noah. Xiang Bao only had the ability to fly. Under such circumstances, Cao Cao could only use the last ability of the sacred spear Forbidden Hand. General Bao. This ability represented a powerful destructive power. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Therefore, the pitch-black sphere exploded like thunder and heavily charged toward Noah's direction. Dong! The fist and the sphere suddenly collided, causing an earth-shattering sound. Chapter 1886. Boom! The violent shockwaves exploded in midair, forming a circular shockwave that spread out in all directions, causing the entire atmosphere to become chaotic and chaotic. The fist that was covered by the crimson dragon scale-like shockwave collided with the sphere that carried an astonishing power. They were in a stalemate, causing waves of shockwaves to fluctuate, stirring up the entire sky as if it was attacked by a typhoon, becoming extremely chaotic. Cao Cao, who had low defensive power, used the jewel vortex that had been absorbing the shockwave to block in front of him, not daring to touch the violent shockwave at all. Seeing Noah's fist and the general's treasure in a stalemate, Cao Cao's mind quickly turned. It seems that Forbidden Hand is still a forbidden hand after all. No matter how powerful Noah Dole's Forbidden Hand is, it's still inferior to Tyrannosaurus in terms of strength. If it was Wally's Tyrannosaurus, even if Cao Cao's general's treasure's destructive power was several times greater, it would still be defeated in an instant. After all, in terms of strength, Tyrannosaurus was among the top 10 in the world. It was definitely not something that the Sacred Spear's Forbidden Hand could block. In terms of strength, Noah's Forbidden Hand was still weaker than Wally's Tyrannosaurus. However, Tyrannosaurus consumed a lot of energy, but Forbidden Hand didn't have this weakness. In terms of endurance and practicality, Noah Dole's Forbidden Hand was undoubtedly stronger than Wally's Tyrannosaurus. The threat was much greater than Wally's Tyrannosaurus. Before finding its weakness, Cao Cao absolutely couldn't let his guard down. Cao Cao's mind was highly concentrated. However, no matter how concentrated he was, Cao Cao didn't expect the next development. Penetrate. When such a word resounded from Noah's body, a terrifying power suddenly penetrated the general's treasure that was in a stalemate and soared up from Noah's fist. Cao Cao didn't even have time to react. The powerful force fiercely rushed over and heavily landed on his body. Boom! A heavy muffled sound shook Cao Cao's body. Poochie! Cao Cao violently coughed out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was sent flying by the powerful force. Like a kite with a broken string, he heavily smashed into the ground and rolled a few times before coming to a stop. An indescribable pain spread throughout Cao Cao's body. However, Cao Cao couldn't care less about the pain that came from his whole body. His mind was filled with questions that he couldn't understand. What? What happened? Just now he was hit, right? Was that Noah's attack? How did he do it? How did he do it? How did he do it? The unexpected situation caused Cao Cao's meticulous thinking to be like a dead machine, constantly jamming. At this time Noah's voice sounded. That's penetration. Hearing this, Cao Cao's mind suddenly became clear as if he had returned to normal. Ignoring the intense pain all over his body, he planted the holy spear on the ground and propped himself up. Penetrate. Cao Cao propped himself up with difficulty and stared at Noah, who was in front of him. What kind of ability is that? Is it an ability unique to the God Slayers? No. Noah said faintly. That's Draeger's ability. Draeger's ability. Cao Cao was stunned. The Red Dragon Emperor's ability? That's right. Noah nodded. Draeger's ability before he was sealed. Other than multiplication and transfer, it's the third ability. That's right. The third ability. After becoming a man-made artifact, Draeger mentioned that the third ability before his death had been reproduced penetration. It was an ability that could penetrate any defense, ignore the obstacles between the user and the target, and cause the user's attack to directly affect the opponent. Just now, Noah used this ability to let his attack pass through the General Treasure's defense and directly affect Cao Cao's body. Although the attack was weakened due to the previous stalemate, with Cao Cao's weak defense, it was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. But that's impossible. Other than multiplication and transfer, the Red Dragon Emperor doesn't have a third ability. Cao Cao immediately refuted, but then he thought of something. Could it be the ability of your subspecies Taming Hand? Just like how Cao Cao could obtain 7 different abilities by obtaining the subspecies Taming Hand, since Noah's Taming Hand was also a subspecies, it might have a different ability from the original. Cao Cao had been guarding against this, but he didn't expect to fall for it. Of course, Cao Cao didn't know that Noah's subspecies Taming Hand was no different from Draeger's original Taming Hand. They could both use multiplication and transfer at will, and did not need to follow the restriction of activating once every 10 seconds. However, because it reproduced the Taming Hand when it fused with the air scale, it became a subspecies Taming Hand. Noah's subspecies Taming Hand did indeed have the air scale ability, which increased its defense by a large margin. However, the subspecies Taming Hand only increased the air scale ability, not the penetration ability. The penetration ability was only Draeger's ability when he was alive, and now it was reproduced by the man-made artifact. Of course, it was very troublesome to explain, so Noah let Cao Cao guess. I've really been taken care of by you today. Noah lifted his feet and slowly walked towards Cao Cao. There was no warmth in his eyes. Kidnapping my student, seizing the power of Orpheus. I'll settle this score with you bit by bit. I haven't lost yet. Cao Cao suddenly coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood, but his eyes were more persistent than ever before. Since my Taming Hand has lost to yours, then you shall witness my tyrannical splendor. After saying that, Cao Cao suddenly raised his holy spear and pointed it at Noah. Spear, the true holy spear that pierces through the gods, absorbing the ideals of the overlord that hibernates in my body, delving into blessings and destruction. Thou tell thy will turn into radiance under Cao Cao's singing. The holy spear that killed the gods bloomed with a strong light. The light was different from the holy light that carried the holy attribute from before. It was filled with an indescribable power. Noah's eyes flashed, but he didn't stop. Instead, he also sang. Avesta activate. Counteracted in turn. Simulate the star atlas. Another cosmology. Dazzling starlight once again shone from Noah's body. Together with the crimson airwaves that covered Noah's body, it illuminated the whole world. Under the starlight, the strong light that bloomed from the holy spear suddenly trembled. Like melting snow, it dissipated little by little. What? Cao Cao turned pale with fright. Impossible. Nothing is impossible, Noah said indifferently. Although I don't know what kind of power you're going to use, since that power is called tyrannical splendor, it should be the power of the overlord, right? Do you think that the power that comes from other sealed existences will work? Just like what Noah said, the Holy Spear also has the power of the Overlord. The Overlord that seals a dragon is called the Tyrant Dragon. The Overlord that seals a beast is called the Tyrant Beast. And within the Holy Spear, there is no power of dragons or beasts sealed. Instead, there is the will left behind by the God of the Bible. That is the Holy Spear's Overlord. The power that released the will of God is tyrannical splendor. When the holder of the Holy Spear uses tyrannical splendor, the will of God in the Holy Spear will absorb the ambition of the holder and respond to the will of the holder, giving birth to various effects and miracles. Sometimes it is an overwhelming destructive power that can defeat the opponent. Sometimes it is a binding ability that can restrict the opponent. But sometimes it is a blessing for the opponent, making the user suffer the consequences of his own actions. That is the price to pay for the Holy Spear's Overlord. Although it is not as dangerous as the Tyrant Dragon, there is a lot of luck involved. Once an effect or ability that is beneficial to the opponent appears, the price to pay will be more terrible than the Tyrant Dragon. Therefore, unless there is no other way, even Cao Cao would not dare to use the power of tyrannical splendor. But in the current situation, even if Cao Cao used tyrannical splendor, it would be useless. It is not that tyrannical splendor did not work, but that the power of God's will was offset by Noah. If it is the power of an artifact, then it is fine. After all, an artifact can only be obtained by an existence with human blood, and has a deep relationship with humans. My trump card is useless against the power of an artifact. But if it is the power of another existence that is sealed, as long as it is not the power of a human, then it is useless against me. Noah stood in front of Cao Cao, whose face was filled with disbelief, and looked down at him. So General Cao Cao. As soon as his voice fell, bang! With a muffled sound, Noah kicked Cao Cao's chest. Poochie! Cao Cao once again spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flew out and heavily smashed into a rock. His whole body was embedded in it. His skin was cut open and a large amount of blood sputtered out. In Cao Cao's hand, the holy spear that was powerful enough to kill a god slowly slid down. With a clang sound, it fell to the ground. The halo and sphere that were suspended behind Cao Cao completely disappeared. Tyrannical splendor was offset. The forbidden hand was lifted. Coupled with his serious injuries, Cao Cao was powerless to reverse the situation. At this point, the outcome was decided. Chapter 1887. The battlefield returned to its original silence. The corpses of the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts were piled up, filling up the entire battlefield. Some of these Grim Reapers and demonic beasts were involved in the aftermath of the battle between Noah and Cao Cao, while the rest were all small fries that were dealt with by Wally's team. Wally, Blacksong, Luffy, Arthur, Monkey, and Fenrir. With just these people, Wally's team was able to deal with enemies that were thousands or tens of thousands of times more than their own. Moreover, after dealing with a large number of enemies, including Luffy, who was the weakest, no one in Wally's team suffered any injuries. They were only somewhat exhausted. Of course, this exhaustion was not caused by the existence of the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts. Although there were many Grim Reapers and demonic beasts, no matter how many there were, they were just small fries. For Wally's team that had gathered all kinds of extraordinary existences, they were just small fries that could be dealt with in a short amount of time. The reason why they were exhausted was because Wally's team had to deal with the other members of the Heroes faction, while dealing with the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts. Don't forget, besides Cao Cao, there were many capable people in the Heroes faction. For example, Siegfried. That guy was the descendant of the famous dragon slayer hero Siegfried. His strength was extraordinary, far from being comparable to those Grim Reapers and demonic beasts. However, this guy found Arthur, who had the strongest holy sword, as his opponent. In the end, he was defeated by the descendant of the Night King, who was the embodiment of coldness and cruelty, when he entered the battle state. In addition, Galgar and Leonardo were also very troublesome. One of them was the owner of Dimension Lost, while the other was the owner of Annihilation Maker. Both of them possessed one of the 4 highest grade godly annihilation tools. Their level of difficulty was comparable to Siegfried's. Unfortunately, there were only a few existences like Cao Cao who could develop and use the power of divine annihilation tools to the extreme. They could even be called unique. Although Galgar and Leonardo were also troublesome, they were still a long distance away from Cao Cao. In the end, they were taken down by Monkey and Fenrir without any suspense. As for the remaining members of the Heroes faction, although they had also inherited the bloodline of the Heroes and Bravehearts, they were still lacking compared to Wally's team. They were all taken down by Wally and Black Song. Although the Heroes faction wanted to use the Jumanli's family as hostages to retreat at the last moment, Noah was not the kind of person who would let the same method. Before the battle with Cao Cao, when he saved Orpheus from Samuel's dragon slaughter, Noah had asked Orpheus to save the Jimenez family after the battle started. The result was obvious. Even though Orpheus had lost half of his power, the remaining half of his power was enough to dominate all existences, allowing him to maintain his title as the strongest dragon god. Therefore, when the battle was in full swing, Orpheus had already saved the Jumanli's family. After losing all means, the Heroes faction completely gave up resistance and chose to surrender. Luffy engraved a sealing magic formation on their bodies and gathered them in the center of the battlefield. It had to be said that Wally and his team were not interested in anything other than fighting. After defeating the Heroes faction and ending the battle, they completely ignored Cao Cao and his team. They did not even want to deal with the aftermath. If not for Noah's request, perhaps they would have just left after the battle and would not care about what Cao Cao and his team did. In other words, Wally and his team were not interested in how to deal with the members of the Heroes faction. They were all members of the team of Calamity. They left everything to Noah. Noah was also happy with this. After all, He had many things to ask the heroes faction. After leaving the sleeping Jumanli family members in the care of his most trusted Luffy, Noah approached the group of hero faction members who were paralyzed on the ground. Looking at Chow Chow, who was covered in wounds and leaning on his companion, Noah asked directly, "Where is the half of Orpheus' power that was taken away?" "We've teleported back to the headquarters of the disaster squad." Chow Chow was silent for a moment before replying with a blank expression. "There are people there in charge of receiving it, but they are not from the hero faction. Instead, they are from the Technology Development Department. After receiving Orpheus' power, they will immediately use that power to create a new Orpheus and make the new Orpheus the leader of the disaster squad." In other words, the real Orpheus had been abandoned by disaster. No, it should be said that from now on, the new Orpheus would be treated as the real Orpheus by the higher-ups of the disaster squad. Like a political puppet, he would be used to confuse those who did not know the truth and continue to maintain the existence of the disaster squad. The disaster group was a terrorist organization made up of many dangerous people, big and small. In order to make these restless fellows obedient, a leader with absolute deterrence was a must. The world's #1 dragon god was without a doubt the best choice. With the name of the infinite dragon god pressuring them, those dangerous people would all join the group of disasters and obediently listen to their orders. Not to mention Orpheus Snake was the best bait to attract those madmen who were chasing after power. With it, the disaster squad could guarantee a steady stream of new members and ensure everyone's fighting power. After all, after swallowing Orpheus Snake, even the weakest person would become at least comparable to a middle demon. But from now on, the disaster squad will probably control the number of snakes given, right? Chow Chow said with unusual calmness. No matter what, although half of Orpheus' power is now divided into two, Orpheus' unlimited power will become limited. It will be impossible to provide a steady stream of snakes like before. Is that so? Noah continued to ask indifferently. Then where is the disaster squad's headquarters? I don't know, Chow Chow said directly. Don't think that I don't want to tell you, I really don't know. Noah frowned. As the biggest faction in the disaster squad and the leader of the heroes faction, how could Chow Chow not know where the disaster squad's headquarters was? However, Chow Chow's words did not sound like a lie. In the end, this question was answered by Wally. The disaster's main camp is located in a different dimension, and the coordinates of that dimension are constantly changing. Only by contacting the people from the R&D department in the main camp will they open the entrance and let us in. But the actions of every member in the disaster squad are under the surveillance of those guys. The news of our defeat has probably reached their ears, so it's impossible for them to open the entrance for us, right? Chow Chow said with a sarcastic expression. As for Wally and the others, because they took Orpheus without permission, they are now considered traitors. They can no longer return to the disaster squad, or rather, they are wanted by the disaster squad. Plus, the various mythological factions are also looking for them. Wally, your situation is worse than mine, right? It doesn't matter, Wally said matter-of-factly. I just need battles that can make people's blood boil. It doesn't matter which faction I join or act alone. As expected of you, Chow Chow said with a bitter smile. It's very similar to your answer. Ignoring Wally and Chow Chow's self-entertainment, Noah sighed. It seems that there is no way to regain the power that Orpheus lost. At this moment, Chow Chow suddenly spoke to Noah. You once said that I am not destined to be a hero. Noah raised his head and looked at Chow Chow. Chow Chow met Noah's gaze and said word by word. Why? Why? These 3 short words were enough to explain the confusion in Chow Chow's heart. In response, Noah said calmly. Because heroes are destined to defeat evil, not demons, demon kings, and demonic dragons. Chow Chow's expression changed slightly, and at the same time he fell into silence. Noah turned around, no longer paying attention to Chow Chow, and looked around. Looking at the scene where the bodies of the Grim Reapers were mixed in with the bodies of the demonic beasts, Noah's eyes shone with a cold light. Hades. Chapter 1888. Today was destined to be an eventful day. At least for those who were at the top of their respective mythical systems, today would be a busy day. Earlier on, under Noah's instructions, Asashel had contacted the main gods of various mythical systems. The purpose was to cancel the arrest warrant for Orpheus. As Asashel had expected, as soon as this matter was brought up, it was immediately opposed by all the mythical forces. If it was so easy to write off the sins committed in the past, then the world would be much more peaceful. In addition, each mythical force had their own thoughts, so the matter of canceling the arrest warrant for Orpheus was unsurprisingly opposed by everyone. However, Asashel was equally fearless. After bringing up Noah's statement, the reactions of the various mythical forces also appeared as expected. What kind of reaction? Anger. That was to be expected, right? Because, as Asashel had said, Noah's statement was not so much a request, but a threat. In this way, not to mention the gods with extremely high status and dignity, even an ordinary person would be angry, right? However, at the same time, the various mythical forces had to hesitate. After all, Orpheus was a major threat that no one could ignore. If Orpheus continued to provide the people of the disaster group with snakes, then this threat would still exist, and the losses of the various forces would continue to increase. If they could avoid the threat brought by Orpheus, no matter who it was, they would want to avoid it. In addition, the Godslayer, who had been in the limelight recently, was obviously on Orpheus's side. Once they refused to cancel the arrest warrant for Orpheus, it was hard to guarantee that the Godslayer would not be pushed to the side of the disaster group. At that time, an existence that could kill gods would become a terrorist, and it would be a greater threat than Orpheus. At least, Orpheus was only interested in the real Red Dragon Emperor, and would not attack the gods of the various mythical forces. Even if he provided the people of the disaster group with snakes, it was impossible for there to be someone who could kill gods with snakes, so the gods of the various mythical forces were still quite assured. But Noah was different. Although most of the gods still thought that it was a big joke for a human to be able to kill a god, and they snorted at it, there were still some gods who were skeptical. It was better to be safe than sorry. If such a thing really happened, what should they do? This was what those gods who had been thinking for a long time were thinking about. As a result, the matter of canceling the arrest warrant for Orpheus had been in a stalemate for a long time without any confirmation. Asashel was not in a hurry either. In any case, if this continued, in order to prevent serious casualties in their respective forces, the mythical forces would have to agree sooner or later. No matter how unwilling he was, it was the same. However, right at that moment, something unexpected happened. After getting in touch with Syzax, Asashel learned that Noah's group had been attacked. Although he was not sure who the attacker was, he knew without thinking that it could only be someone from the disaster squad. Under such circumstances, Asashel hurriedly prepared for a rescue. However, not long after the rescue operation began, Asashel received news that not only was Noah and company safe and sound, but they had also wiped out all the members of the hero faction. Asashel breathed a sigh of relief as he thought to himself, as expected of the Godslayer. Then he hurriedly tried to contact Noah. However, before Asashel could contact Noah, Noah took the initiative to call and directly threw out such a sentence. Get all the main gods of the mythical forces to come to the underworld for a meeting. When this sentence pierced Asashel's ears, there was only one thought that came to Asashel's mind. This time they had really gone too far. Due to the previous resolution on the arrest warrant for Orpheus, Asashel easily contacted the various mythical forces and asked each mythical force to send at least one representative to gather in the underworld. Although the various mythical forces were a little stunned and puzzled about this, after learning that the famous Godslayer would also attend the meeting, they immediately decided to come to the meeting one by one. These gods probably had the same idea as Odin previously. They wanted to see with their own eyes if the rumored Godslayer really had the ability to kill gods. Although some extremely xenophobic mythical forces were repulsed by the idea of contacting other mythical forces, in order to confirm this matter, no matter which mythical force it was, they all sent people to attend the meeting. Because they did not know if this meeting was the so-called Hongmen banquet, many mythical forces did not send their main gods in person. There were only 4 main gods who came to attend the meeting in person. One was the main god of Norse mythology, Odin. One was the main god of Greek mythology, Zeus. One was the god of destruction of the 3 main gods of Hinduism, Shiva. The other was the highest ruling god of the 33 heavens of Mount Meru, the holy land that ruled almost all the gods and Buddhas in Buddhism, Sakra. The reason why these main gods and gods came in person was that they each had their own ideas. Odin came in person because he had reached an agreement with the demons, angels, and fallen angels, so he did not suspect his allies. Zeus came in person because the Greek mythical forces had been in contact with the demons, angels, and fallen angels for a long time. He was not as vigilant as the other mythical forces, so he came in person. However, he still brought Poseidon and Hades. Shiva and Sakra were bold because of their skills. These two gods were, in fact, ranked in the top 10 in the world. The former's ranking was only below Orpheus. The latter had the title of the strongest god of war. One could imagine how powerful they were. Under such circumstances, in the center of Lilith, the capital of the underworld's demon king's territory, representatives of various mythological forces sat around a huge round table in a vast conference room in a magnificent building. With the four main gods leading their respective mythological gods as the leaders, the representatives of various mythological forces sat around a huge round table. Among them, the representative of the angels, Michael, and the four demon kings, who represented the demons, were also present. As the initiators of the meeting, Noah and Athaziel arrived late. Kacha. With a very soft sound of the door opening, the door of the conference room was opened. Outside the door, Noah and Athaziel walked in one after another, attracting the attention of everyone present. In an instant, an extremely oppressive feeling filled the entire space of the conference room. The gods of various mythical systems all looked in one direction. The pressure was definitely enough to make an ordinary person's spirit collapse. Even Athaziel felt like his heart was being fiercely squeezed, and his expression stiffened for a moment. Only Noah walked into the conference room without changing his expression. Under the gazes of all the gods present and the terrible pressure that filled the entire conference room, he looked around at all the gods, and his eyes stopped on one person. No, it could no longer be called a person. It was a skeleton. A skeleton without any flesh, wearing a luxurious robe like a priest, wearing a priest's hat, and holding a cane inlaid with a pitch-black pearl at the top. The skeleton naturally had no eyes, but a pair of eye sockets flashed with red light. Being stared at by that pair of eyes, even Noah had an illusion that the other party was not looking at him, but at his soul. It was very strange. Therefore Noah could be sure. This guy was the god of the underworld in Greek mythology, Hades. In other words, the skeleton in front of him had made an agreement with the people of the hero sect and lent Samuel to the hero sect, causing Orpheus to lose half of his power. He was also the culprit who had brazenly sent the god of death, intending to seize Orpheus by force. The main reason why Noah called for this meeting was because of this guy. Come to think of it, Hades should have more or less expected this, but he still came here. He was probably not afraid at all. No matter what, like Shiva and Sakra, Hades was also one of the top 10 gods in the world. Therefore, Hades was not afraid at all. Under such circumstances, Noah calmly withdrew his gaze and followed Athaziel to the main seat of the conference room. Athaziel sat down next to him. Noah, on the other hand, was sitting in the main seat with his head held high. The atmosphere became more oppressive. Chapter 1889. Generally speaking, as the organizer of the conference, it was a matter of course for them to sit at the head of the table. However, it did not mean that just because they hosted a conference, they were qualified to sit at the head of the table. It depended on what kind of occasion it was. What kind of occasion was it now? The main gods and representatives of the various mythical forces that ruled this world were all present, and they sat down, ready to participate in this conference. In the end, a human was sitting at the head of the table, above the gods of all the forces. How could the atmosphere at the scene not become oppressive? At least, many of the representatives of the mythical forces looked at Noah with extremely sinister gazes, and they almost attacked him on the spot. The reason why they did not attack him on the spot was probably because he was a godslayer. Therefore, as the party that had reached a peace agreement with the demons, angels, and fallen angels, the main god of Norse mythology, Odin, looked at Noah curiously and was the first to speak, breaking the silence at the scene. You are the godslayer who has been rumored to be very powerful recently, right? The Norse main god who spoke was an extremely old man with a gray beard and a monocle on one eye. As the only ally of the demons, angels, and fallen angels at the scene, Odin had come here to look for Noah before reaching a peace agreement, intending to see for himself what kind of person the human known as the godslayer was. Unfortunately, at that time Noah was not in this world, causing Odin's plan to fall apart. However, it also gave Syzax and Asashel the opportunity to negotiate with the Norse main god and truly reach a peace agreement. Now that he had finally seen Noah with his own eyes, and he was also an ally of the demons, angels and fallen angels, Odin was naturally the first to speak, breaking the silence and easing the oppressive atmosphere slightly. However, before Noah could answer, Sakra, the highest ruling god of Mount Meru, turned his gaze to Noah. Indescribable emotions fluctuated in his eyes as he said this. I have to say that you are very bold. A human actually dares to put the title of Godslayer on his head. Because of this, almost every mythical force has a god who regards you as a thorn in their side. Saying this, Sakra, who sounded like he was lamenting and sarcastic at the same time, was a brawny man with a string of Buddhist beads hanging around his neck and was a little slovenly. Although he looked so sloppy, this person was indeed Dishurtion, the leader of the gods and Buddhas, the king of the gods of Mount Meru or Indra. However, the feeling that the Dishurtion in this world gave to Noah was completely different from the feeling that the Dishurtion in the box gave to Noah. The Dishurtion in the box court was a completely useless god. However, Noah could feel that Sakra's heart had a part of gentleness and love, making people feel that even if he was a cripple, he was still worthy of the name of Buddha. However, the feeling that the Dishurtion in this world gave to Noah wasn't the slightest bit in the aspect of gentleness and love of gods and Buddhas. Instead, he had a rather strong sense of existence in the aspect of martial gods. In addition, when he met the Dishurtion in the box court for the first time, that useless god had already descended from heaven to become a human, and the spirit of the king of gods was greatly suppressed. Therefore, the Dishurtion in this world was a lot stronger than the Dishurtion in the box court who descended from heaven to become a human. However, Noah still had a good impression of the Dishurtion in the box court. As for the Dishurtion in this world, Noah didn't have even the slightest bit of good impression. That sarcastic tone really made people a little angry. Thus, Noah also responded indifferently. There's no need for the famous king of gods and Buddhas to worry. Of course, if you want to protect me a little from those gods who see me as a thorn in their flesh, then that's another matter. No, I'm also a god and Buddha. In front of the great god slayer, I'm just a prey to be killed. How can I protect you? Dishurtion laughed pretentiously. So you'd better pray for yourself. This fellow was truly infuriating. Don't worry about him. Asashel lowered his voice and said to Noah, that guy is like this. His words are so unpleasant to hear. Moreover, the greater the threat to him, the more unpleasant his words are. I reckon that guy is also testing you. Don't fall into his trap. Even without Asashel's reminder, Noah knew that Dishurtion was actually deliberately provoking him. In terms of means, this approach wasn't very clever, but it was often very effective. Noah wouldn't be so easily provoked by others. After all, Noah's opponents were all the mythical powers present, not just a god and Buddha. I'll make it clear first. Noah ignored Dishurtion and looked around at all the gods present. I didn't ask you to attend this meeting because I wanted to play along with you. There's no need to sound each other out. If you have any doubts or dissatisfaction in your hearts, you can directly raise them here. When you're done, I'll talk about my matters. This sentence made all the gods present raise their eyebrows. The way they looked at Noah changed directly. Although Noah's speech was quite arrogant, such a straightforward showdown really caught all the gods off guard. Only one of the three Hindu gods, Shiva, the god of destruction, let out a laugh. Interesting. In the face of so many gods and Buddhas, you can still be so arrogant. This is the first time I've seen such a human. Just based on this point, no matter if you have really killed a god or not, you are qualified to be on equal footing with us. I'll acknowledge you. Shiva's words made all the gods present slightly change their expressions. No one dared to ignore the words of this god who looked to be only 14 or 15 years old and had very good facial features, just like an underage teenager. Among all the mythical powers, Indian mythology was one of the best. Not to mention others, just looking at the top 10 in the world, even famous mythical powers like Norse mythology, Greek mythology, and Celtic mythology only had one or two names that could enter the list. However, Indian mythology had a total of 3 people occupying the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th places below Orpheus. This situation could be seen. Among the 3 of them, Shiva was one of the strongest, just below Orpheus. Even if other than Orpheus, who was the undisputed first place, the rest were not ranked first. Shiva, who had the name of the god of destruction, was recognized as the strongest. At least, the dangerous aura that Noah's sensory ability feedback told him. Shiva was probably at the top of the 4-digit list. That was why the god of destruction was ranked second in the top 10 in the world. Since the god of destruction had acknowledged Noah, even if the other gods were not convinced, they had to shut their mouths. Zeus, the main god of Greek mythology, could not help but laugh. Since you are recognized by one of the 3 great gods of Hinduism and the god of destruction, little brother, you are really not simple. Zeus was an uncle with a crown on his head, a long robe on his body, and a full beard on his face. The moment the uncle spoke, he gave off a sense of intimacy. It was as if he was a familiar face, which made people wonder if he was the king of gods in Greek mythology. Noah could even hear Athena's unhappy voice in his mind. Annoying men, no matter which world they are in, are always so annoying. This reminded Noah that Zeus was Athena's enemy. Only the half-naked Poseidon, who was sitting next to Zeus, laughed out loud, which made Athena even more displeased. By the way, Poseidon was also Athena's enemy. Of course, it did not refer to this world. At this time, Hades finally spoke. So, great god slayer, what are you planning to do by gathering all the gods of the various mythological forces? As the initiator, Hades took the initiative to cut to the chase. Moreover, he said it in a joking tone. Undoubtedly, this guy knew everything, but he pretended not to know and was fearless. Noah glanced at Hades and immediately said something that stunned Hades. I have gathered you here mainly for 2 things. First, you should know that the demons, angels, and fallen angels are working hard to promote peace. They want to reach a peace agreement with the various mythological forces, but they have been unable to do so for a long time. So, I hope that you can give me an answer here. Chapter 1890. What? Hearing Noah's words, all the gods present were really stunned. Not to mention the gods of the various mythical forces, even the representatives of the demons, angels, and fallen angels such as Asashel, Syzax, and Michael were stunned and then became anxious. Noah! Asashel said in shock. You! Without giving Asashel a chance to speak, Noah directly stretched out his hand and blocked all of Asashel's words. I know this kind of thing can't be rushed. Whether to cooperate or not is not something that can be decided so rashly. Moreover, almost all the mythical forces are very xenophobic. They won't easily decide to conclude a peace treaty, let alone have a showdown on such an occasion. That will directly block this road and will only make things worse. Noah said this as if he didn't realize that the main gods and representatives of the various mythical forces were present. But I'm impatient. With such a sentence, Noah stood up, and his gaze pierced all the gods present like a sharp sword. I'm a teacher in a school in the human world. Although I'm not responsible for teaching, I have a few demon students. Our relationship with each other is not bad. I also have some friendship with them and even with their families. Noah's sudden narration directly made the gods of the various mythical forces look at each other. This human at this time, what was he planning to do by saying this kind of thing? Noah ignored the doubts of all the gods present and continued to speak. Although they are all demons, they enjoy life in the human world. Even if they are attacked by terrorist groups like the Disaster Group, they still work hard to maintain this kind of daily life and fight without telling everyone. As a human, this makes me very gratified. Syzax and Seraphil, who knew who Noah was talking about, were silent. This was because the 2 demon kings' younger sisters were among the students that Noah mentioned. At that moment, Noah's tone changed all of a sudden. Not long ago, we were attacked by the Disaster Group again. This time it was the biggest faction in the Disaster Group, the Hero faction. Their strength is very strong. At least, my students who haven't grown up are definitely not their opponents. As a result, they were reduced to hostages and used to threaten me with the purpose of seizing the power of Orpheus. Seizing the power of Orpheus. The gods were shocked. Even Shiva, Odin, Zeus, Poseidon, and Sakra narrowed their eyes slightly, as if they were thinking about something. Only Hades said pretentiously, a group of terrorists actually have the idea of seizing the infinite dragon god. There are also many people who don't care about their lives among humans. Although there are some people who overestimate themselves among humans, not all of them are idiots. The Hero faction dared to have the idea of seizing Orpheus, So they naturally have something to rely on, Noah said faintly. And their reliance is the help provided by some gods who don't want to see their own mythical forces come into contact with other mythical forces. The reason is that they hate demons and fallen angels, which are so boring that people can't help but want to laugh. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became stiff, especially Hades. Under Noah's obviously contemptuous words, the red light in his eye sockets became brighter. However, Noah didn't expose Hades in front of him, but said this. I know that there are actually many gods who are as boring as this. Almost every mythical force has gods who don't want to see their own mythical forces come into contact with other mythical forces. Loki of Northern Europe is one of them. This time, the guy who played some dirty tricks behind my back is also one of them. If it were in the past, I wouldn't be so free and elegant to meddle in other people's business and intervene in the affairs of various mythical forces. After all, I'm just a human. Noah curled his lips and smiled. However, the actions of the people of the hero faction also tell me that as long as this matter is not finalized, those boring guys who don't want to see their own mythical forces come into contact with other mythical forces will keep jumping around. That's really too endless. Under such circumstances, if my lovely students are involved in a boring dispute one day, Noah looked around at all the gods present. His voice was like a sharp knife, instantly piercing into the hearts of all the gods. I'm afraid that I won't be able to hold back and slaughter all the gods who are jumping around in the dark together with their entire mythical forces. As soon as his voice fell, almost all the gods present suddenly stood up from their seats. Their whole bodies surged with a terrifying aura as they stared at Noah, their eyes full of anger. Even Shiva, Odin, Zeus, Poseidon, and Sakra's faces sank as they slowly stood up. Kid, Sakra said sarcastically, don't you think that you're a bit too arrogant? Young man, I know that you are very angry about your students being attacked, but some words are destined not to be said carelessly, Odin advised. Otherwise, it will spoil things. Although I admit that you are very courageous, I have to say that as long as they are gods, they can't pretend that they didn't hear your words. Shiva shrugged. Do you think that you alone can deal with all the gods of the mythological forces present here? We can totally understand that. You didn't get it wrong, Noah said indifferently. That's what I think. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became cold. At this moment, all the gods of the mythical forces, except for Odin, who was their ally, cast indifferent, angry, contemptuous, and disdainful looks at Noah. Their expressions were extremely ugly. Ha 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 ha. Hades couldn't help but laugh. I thought that the legendary Godslayer was so great, but it turns out that he is just an ignorant kid. How ironic. Asashel, Syzax, Seraph, Michael, and the other demons, angels, and fallen angels all showed bitter expressions. Because they knew that things had developed to a point where they couldn't be saved. Under such circumstances, Noah didn't seem to understand the current situation at all and spoke expressionlessly. In short, in order to prevent some rats from jumping around in the dark, I hope that everyone will give an answer here. Do you want to conclude a peace treaty with the demons, angels, and fallen angels? I am willing to be a witness and preside over your peace treaty. In the future, if someone violates the peace treaty, I will personally take action and annihilate him. If you don't want to conclude a peace treaty in the future, if the gods of the mythical forces you belong to play tricks, I will make that mythical force disappear completely. His unceremonious speech made all the gods furious. Even Odin sighed and shook his head. As for Asashel, Syzax, Michael, and the others, the bitterness on their faces was even stronger. Noah, who would be willing to conclude a peace treaty after hearing what you said? Wouldn't that be tantamount to directly admitting that they were afraid of you? How could this matter still be resolved after offending all the mythical forces? This time it was really over. However, at this moment Noah's tone changed again. Of course, everyone can wait for a while before giving an answer. Wait until I resolve the second thing I want to say. With that said, Noah ignored all the gods present and turned to look at Hades. That gaze was no longer as sharp as a sword as before. Instead, it was as cold as ice, incomparably cold. Hades, the god of the underworld, one of the top 10 in the world. In order to obtain Orpheus, you did not hesitate to lend Samuel to the heroes and even brazenly sent out the Grim Reaper. Do you really think that no one dares to do anything to you? The moment Noah said this, a crimson gauntlet appeared in Noah's hand. Balance breaker. The gauntlet suddenly exploded and turned into a crimson wave that covered Noah's entire body. Boom! In the center of Lilith, the capital of the Demon King's territory, the top of an extremely magnificent building suddenly exploded. With a deafening roar, it exploded, causing an astonishing impact. Chapter 1891. Kaboom! The explosion that resounded through the clouds caused the entire top of the magnificent building to be blown away, setting off a powerful impact and a dense flame. It was like a huge firework blooming in the air, quite pleasing to the eye. Pieces of gravel and rubble fell from the sky in the explosion like scattered flowers, and fell to the ground in a burst of crackling sound. The sudden explosion and movement startled all the demons in Lilith, the capital of the Demon King's territory. What's wrong? What happened? Why did it suddenly explode? Could it be that the group of calamities attacked the underworld? Uproar and panic spread throughout the capital of Lilith. In this aspect, their reaction was no different from that of humans. After all, it could be seen from the scale of the explosion that it was not a scene that ordinary demons could deal with. Without the strength of a superior demon, being affected by the explosion would probably cause one to be smashed into pieces. It was precisely because of their strength that the demons could understand what the explosion meant. Therefore, uproar and panic were inevitable. Until a certain moment, a sharp-eyed demon discovered something and pointed to the sky. "Look over there. There's someone there." This involuntary shout immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding demons to the sky. Only then did the group of demons discover something. At the top of the magnificent building that exploded in the intense flames, a group of people flew out one after another. The first to fly out were two people. Because of the height, even with the demons' eyesight, they could still only see a blurry shadow. However, above the two blurry shadows, one was vibrating with a crimson dragon-shaped airwave all over his body, while the other was fluctuating with a dark shadow of death all over his body. This was clearly seen by the crowd of demons. However, it was precisely because they saw it clearly that the demons in the capital of Lilith all held their breaths. Because from the two figures, a terrifying pressure that was enough to destroy heaven and earth spread out and shrouded down, causing the faces of the demons to begin to turn pale. What's more, even the shadows that flew out from the center of the explosion carried an extremely terrifying aura, causing the hearts of the demons to begin to tremble. In the sky, Noah and Hades were facing each other with a distance between them. Noah's expression was like an ancient well without any ripples. Hades was just a skeleton without any expression at all, but the red light in his pair of eye sockets was like a burning anger, constantly rising. After that, Hades's deep voice rang out. "Do you want to die, human?" That voice was as if it could drill deep into one's soul. It was terrifying. Unfortunately, Noah acted as though he did not feel anything and mocked him. "It seems that you really think that even if you attack us and wallow in the mire with those guys from the heroes faction, no one will do anything to you, skeleton." "I don't know what you're talking about." Hades' voice was still low, but he began to play dumb. "You're saying that I'm wallowing in the mire with the people from the disaster faction? Do you have any evidence?" Obviously, Hades had long expected that he would definitely be held responsible. He even prepared an excuse. However, Hades did not expect that Noah would actually interrogate him after attacking him. Moreover, Noah did not fall for Hades's trick at all. "Evidence? Don't tell me you've made a mistake? What evidence do I need to show?" Noah laughed. "Don't tell me you think that I intend to expose your actions and let the various mythological factions convict you?" Saying such a sentence, Noah's expression became indifferent. "Stop joking. Since I know that you did it, that's enough. Your crime will be judged by me." "Convict me? A mere human actually wants to convict a god?" Hades laughed angrily. "Interesting, it's really interesting. In the past, I've always convicted the dead humans. No human has ever convicted me. Godslayer, you're crazy enough. I'd like to see how you're going to convict me." After saying that, Hades' whole body swelled with thick darkness as if he was shrouded by the shadow of death. It was like a dark flame burning, instantly swallowing the light in the entire space. "Godslayer, let me see how you can kill a god." The orb at the top of the staff that Hades held tightly in his hand bloomed with light. Suddenly, the thick darkness that covered the entire space suddenly trembled and boiled like magma. With a tumble, it carried a terrifying wave of death. It was like black water falling from the sky, covering the direction where Noah was. The representatives of the demons, angels, and fallen angels, such as Syzax, Seraph, Asashel, and Michael, who were preparing to stop Noah and Hades, were shocked when they saw this scene. "Not good," Syzax shouted. "If such an attack falls, all the residents in the city will have their souls taken away and be directly taken into the underworld." "That bastard!" Asashel was angry. He didn't even consider what would happen to the ordinary residents in the city. It's better to say that he simply intends to use this opportunity to make a scene in the demons' territory. The main reason why Hades helped the heroes was that he didn't want to see his own mythical forces come into contact with the mythical forces of the Bible. This was because Hades hated demons and fallen angels very much. Demons and fallen angels lived in the underworld. The underworld that Hades controlled was located below the underworld. It was as if he was being crushed by a devil and a fallen angel. Therefore, Hades hated demons and fallen angels. If he could make a scene in the underworld and cut off a piece of the demon's flesh, Hades would definitely be happy. After that, he only needed to push the blame to Noah, who took the initiative to attack, and Hades could happily watch Syzax and Asashel swallow their anger. In view of this, Hades did not show any mercy when he attacked. The attack range had already enveloped several cities around the Demon King's territory, including the capital, Lilith. The attack range of one of the top 10 powerhouses in the world included an entire huge city. At this moment, all the demons could only watch the darkness pouring down from the sky, and they were all stunned on the spot. Seeing the scene as if the entire dark sky was collapsing, Syzax, Seraph, Asashel, and the others could not help but feel anxious. At this moment, under the dark sky that seemed to be collapsing, a ray of starlight lit up. Avesta activated dash. Amidst the starlight, a voice that seemed to echo from the distant horizon rang out. Counteract it one by one. Simulating another cosmology. The bright starlight suddenly turned into a gorgeous Milky Way that soared into the sky. It expanded and surged in all directions like a tide, covering the entire space in an instant. Under the gorgeous starlight, the death power that was like the dark sky was like a flame that touched water. It trembled and quickly disintegrated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Boom! In the end, the disintegrating thick darkness directly exploded and dissipated in the air like scattered black clouds. What? Hades finally got up in shock. At the same time, a crimson figure silently appeared in front of Hades. The moment the crimson light in Hades's eye sockets fluctuated violently, he raised his head and exposed a pair of deep, dark eyes to Hades. "Then let me tell you why I killed a god." Amidst the crimson waves of air, a burst of dense darkness suddenly burst forth. The darkness was exactly the same as the death power that Hades controlled. Immediately after, Noah clenched his fist, which was mixed with a red airwave and dense darkness, and like a falling meteorite, he slammed it heavily in front of Hades. Boom! A deafening muffled sound resounded. Chapter 1892. Boom! When the thunder-like sound suddenly appeared in the sky, a circle of shock waves that scattered the clouds high above suddenly shook and spread to the surroundings. The entire atmosphere was suddenly cleared, and there was a temporary vacuum phenomenon. Whoosh! Immediately, in a sharp sound, a black shadow fell from the sky like a meteorite falling from the sky, with some flames fluctuating on its outline. Under the gaze of all the demons in the capital of Lilith, it crossed the sky and fell straight into the wilderness outside the city. Boom! The next second, the ground shook, and a mushroom cloud of dust rose in the wilderness outside the capital of the Demon King's territory, Lilith, as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. That scene made all the fiends' complexions turn pale in an instant. If such an impact fell in Lilith, what would happen to them, who were still in Lilith? At the thought of this, all the demons felt an uncontrollable fear rising in their hearts. In the wilderness outside the capital of Lilith, in the meteorite crater where a mushroom cloud of dust rose, Hades, who was still fluctuating with the darkness of the shadow of death, stood up with difficulty. However, Hades didn't notice. Behind him, a figure that was mixed with crimson air waves and dense darkness silently appeared once again. Then the figure slowly raised a foot, and at the moment when Hades was about to struggle to get up, the figure fell heavily like a heavy mountain. Boom! With a muffled bang, the ground of the entire wilderness suddenly shook and collapsed like an avalanche. It gave rise to a terrifying impact like a storm and dense sand and dust, causing countless rocks and debris to flutter about and scatter in all directions. Ah, 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 ah. Hades' screams resounded from the huge meteorite crater. The screams made the hearts of the gods and representatives of the various mythical powers, who were flying at high speed, tremble. It wasn't until the violent impact and thick dust that permeated the whole world below slowly dissipated that the situation inside was exposed to everyone's eyes, that the gods saw it. In the center of the meteorite crater, in the center of the ground, where cracks spread like a spider web, Noah, who was fluctuating with red air waves and rich darkness, was standing there. As for Hades, he was lying in front of Noah screaming and struggling, but he couldn't get up at all. Because on Hades' body, one of Noah's feet was fiercely stepping on him, and the power it carried was so strong that Hades couldn't resist it at all. Noah kept exerting force, and there were cracking sounds on Hades' body, as if something was breaking. Ah, 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 ah. With Noah's constant exertion of force, Hades' screams reverberated uncontrollably. The screams were like ferocious ghosts and ferocious beasts, which made the gods of mythical powers tremble in their hearts. Finally, shock appeared in their eyes. Who was Hades? Not to mention his status in Greek mythology, just in terms of strength, the god of the underworld occupied a place among the top 10 masters in the world. Now, one of the top 10 masters in the world was being trampled under the foot of a human being like a dog? Was this a joke? Not to mention the gods of the mythical powers, even the representatives of demons, angels and fallen angels, such as Syzyx, Asashel and Michael, who knew that Noah had power comparable to that of Orpheus to a certain extent, couldn't help but be shocked. Indeed, because of their good relationship with Noah, Syzyx, Asashel, and the others all knew that Noah was powerful. However, from the time Noah suddenly attacked Hades, to the time when Hades was trampled under the foot of Noah and couldn't turn over, how long had it been? Was it a minute? Probably not, right? As a result, in less than a minute, one of the top 10 gods in the world was mercilessly trampled under the foot of Noah. How could this not make people feel shocked? As for Odin, Shiva and Sakra, they saw more. Odin narrowed his eyes and stared at Noah as he said, "If my eyes aren't blurred, I shouldn't have seen wrongly, right? The power fluctuating on the body of the Godslayer, that's the power of God, right?" "That's right." Shiva stared closely at the thick darkness mixed in the crimson waves on Noah's body and whispered, "And that power is very familiar." "Are you kidding?" The sarcastic expression on Sakra's face had long disappeared and was replaced by a deep frown. "That guy, why is he using the power of Hades?" Yes, Noah was using the power of Hades. The thick darkness was the power of death of Hades, the god of the underworld. If an ordinary person came into contact with it, they would immediately turn into a corpse. Their vitality would be completely wiped out, and even their soul could be annihilated. Now this power that belonged to Hades was being used by Noah, a human. How is this possible? Hades roared in disbelief. "Why are you using my power?" Noah looked down at Hades with an expressionless face as he slowly increased the strength of his foot. "Ah!" Hades once again let out a blood-curdling scream, and the bones in his body began to make a gg sound. "So it turns out that you can still feel pain without flesh and only bones?" Noah said sarcastically. "Do you want to know why I have your power? Then let me tell you." With such a sentence, Noah raised one of his hands. His hand was not only fluctuating with red waves of air and thick darkness, but also a gorgeous layer of starlight. "This is the power called another cosmology," Noah said faintly. "Its effect is very simple. It can add the opponent's power, ability, and even all the performance of the opponent to the user so that the user can obtain all the strength of the opponent, and can also be used to offset the opponent's power. Your power will become mine during the time you are my opponent." This sentence not only made the gods of the myths widen their eyes, but also made the pupils of Shiva and Sakra, who were also in the top 10 of the world, shrink. The ability to obtain all the power of the opponent? Impossible! Hades shouted in horror. How could there be such a terrible power? Of course, this power is not omnipotent. It does not work on humans. Even if it is a mixed blood with a human, or a power with a deep relationship with a human, it will not work at all. However, as long as the opponent is not a human but a god like you, then the stronger you are, the stronger I will be. No matter how many of you there are, it will only make my power stronger, and I will never be below you." Noah looked at Hades as if he was looking down on him. "Now do you know why I can kill a god? Impossible. Impossible. Impossible." Hades muttered to himself as if he was possessed. How could a human have such an ability? How could it be? Not only did Hades not believe it, but the gods of the myths were also not willing to believe it. However, at the same time all the gods present understood. "I see." Shiva's eyes flashed with a terrifying light. Is this why he dared to boast about wiping out all the myths by himself? As long as that ability existed, then unless the opponent was a human, there was absolutely no possibility of defeating Noah. Therefore, even if the enemy was all the mythical powers, that human dared to say that he would kill all the gods. Therefore, a mere human dared to call himself a god slayer. Gods were absolutely unable to defeat this human. Understanding this point, all the gods present were alarmed and frightened. "Do you understand? Lord God of the underworld?" Noah's eyes flashed with a cold light. "You should really regret attacking us." After saying this, murderous intent rose from Noah's body. Chapter 1893. The murderous aura that rose from Noah's body directly stimulated Hades, who seemed to be in a trance. You want to kill me?" Hades said in disbelief. That was to be expected. Not to mention the consequences of killing Hades, just the fact that he would be killed was something that Hades could not accept. It wasn't that Hades was afraid of death. As the god of the underworld, as the god in charge of death and souls, death was definitely not something to be afraid of for Hades. However, before this, Hades had never thought that he would die. He had lent Samuel to the hero sect and coveted Orpheus. He had even sent the Grim Reaper's army to snatch Orpheus, who had lost half of his strength. Since Hades dared to do these things, he definitely had thought of the consequences of his actions. First of all, Samuel was sealed by the entire Greek mythology, and was then handed over to Hades to manage. If Hades released Samuel without authorization, and let Samuel's power appear in the world, the gods of Greek mythology would punish Hades for this alone. The heroes were the terrorists of the disaster group, and were now the common enemy of all the mythical forces. Not only had Hades lent Samuel out without permission, but he had also lent Samuel to the terrorists of the disaster squad. Not to mention the Greek mythology, all the mythology forces had the right to pursue Hades's responsibility and make him suffer. However, Hades was not afraid. Because there was no evidence, right? Even if this matter was exposed, Hades had a way to avoid it. He believed that under the prestige of the top 10 powerhouses in the world, there were definitely not many who would really want to offend Hades. Therefore, even if the matter was exposed in the end, the excuse he found would be useless. At most, Hades would be punished. It was more likely that the big matter would be reduced to a small matter. In the end, nothing would happen at all. Even if it was the demons who had been sent by the heroes to attack them, considering that it was a critical moment for them to come into contact with Greek mythology, and that they needed to fight for an opportunity to conclude a peace treaty, they would choose to swallow their anger. They would not do something as hurtful as holding the heroes accountable, which would not benefit them in any way, right? It was precisely because of these factors that Hades was fearless and not worried at all. But now, Noah's appearance had directly shattered Hades's wishful thinking. How dare he attack Hades so rudely and unreasonably, even intending to kill him? How could Hades, who wasn't worried about this matter in the first place, accept this result? Immediately, Hades cried out in panic. "Zeus! Poseidon! Aren't you going to save me?" One of the top 10 powerhouses in the world had actually asked for help. In the sky, Zeus and Poseidon, who were mingling among the gods of the myths, looked at each other and laughed bitterly. Zeus, Hades, Poseidon. In Greek mythology, the three of them were brothers. Moreover, they were blood brothers. Among them, Hades was the eldest, Poseidon was the second, and Zeus was the youngest. The three of them ruled the underworld, the sea, and the sky respectively. They were called Hades, Poseidon, and Father of the Heavens. Although in Greek mythology Zeus, who was the youngest, was the king of the gods in terms of strength, Hades was the first. There was no doubt that he was the first in Greek mythology. In addition, Noah was their blood brother. Whether it was for public or private reasons, Zeus and Poseidon couldn't just watch Hades be killed by Noah. Originally, he thought that with Noah's arrogant words, he would definitely suffer a big loss or even lose his life after facing Hades. Who knew that the result was that Hades would be abused like a dog? Therefore, it was not that Zeus and Poseidon didn't help, but they were stunned. Now that they had reacted, they couldn't continue to watch in a daze. "Little brother, if my brother has offended you in any way, please forgive him," Zeus said quickly. "Isn't there a saying that adults are magnanimous? You must be an adult, right? Anyway, you've already taught him a lesson, haven't you?" Poseidon laughed bitterly. "How about we just let him go?" As they said that, Zeus and Poseidon kept winking at Syzax and Asashel. Obviously, the two wanted Syzax and Asashel, who had a better relationship with Noah, to plead for Hades. However, Hades had clearly seen Zeus and Poseidon's little trick. Before Syzax and Asashel could say anything, Hades was enraged. What did Hades hate the most? Demons and fallen angels. Now it was embarrassing enough to ask his brothers for help. How could he let the leaders of the demons and fallen angels, whom he hated the most, plead for him? That kind of thing was absolutely impossible. "What nonsense are you still talking about?" Hades was furious. "This human brat doesn't take us gods seriously at all. Are you going to bow down to him? Don't tell me you're afraid of the power called another cosmology?" Hades roared angrily. "That kind of power can't exist in this world. Even if it does, it can't be obtained by a human. He's just talking big." Rather than saying this to others, it would be better to say that he was saying this to himself. Hades was not willing to believe that Noah had such a terrible power. "I don't believe it. I don't believe it." Hades's roar resounded through the sky. "I don't believe it." In the midst of his roar, Hades's whole body surged with a terrible aura, setting off a violent wind that made the whole ground begin to tremble. Buzz, 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 buzz. The pitch-black power of death turned into a frantically surging fog that rose from Hades's body. The black gas seemed to be like the faces of people struggling in pain, and it let out a sharp wail that sounded like a wail. The hair-raising aura and scene made many gods present feel a chill in their hearts. However, Noah only glanced at this scene, and the foot that was stepping on Hades suddenly tightened. Clang! The another cosmology starlight, named Avesta, shone from Noah's body and surged towards Hades' direction. Chi 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 chi. All of a sudden, amidst the strange sounds that sounded like ice melting, the power of death that surged from Hades's body seemed to have been dispelled by the light, vanishing without a trace. Hades, who was emitting a terrifying aura like that of a ghost, instantly returned to his harmless appearance. Gotcha! At the next moment, along with a crisp sound, the few bones in front of Hades were crushed by Noah's stomp. Ah! An unprecedentedly strong cry of agony came from Hades's mouth. Stop! Zeus and Poseidon finally couldn't stand it anymore. They rushed out and rushed in Noah's direction. Come on! Noah raised his head and looked at Zeus and Poseidon, who were rushing toward him from midair. His eyes were full of fighting spirit. Let me see just how powerful the three main gods of Greek mythology are. The crimson waves of air that were fluctuating around Noah's body completely disappeared. Noah had cancelled his forbidden hand. However, Zeus and Poseidon's attacks made Avesta regard them as enemies. The starlight of the another cosmology shone on Noah's body. Then the power of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, the three most famous gods in Greek mythology, flowed into Noah's body, making Noah's body surge with a terrifying aura. Ha! With a violent shout, Noah suddenly released all the power in his body. Suddenly, violent thunderbolts, turbulent waves, and ominous black gas all shook from Noah's body and exploded in all directions, as if they were going to destroy the heavens and the earth. Roar, roar, roar! Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon roared at the same time. A bolt of lightning appeared in Zeus's hand, a staff in Poseidon's hand, and a trident in Poseidon's hand. Lightning, black gas, and waves surged out of their bodies as they charged forward. Boom! An astonishing roar resounded through the sky. Chapter 1894. Boom! The roar that resounded through the sky turned into a sound wave that vibrated in all directions. The gods of the myths felt as if they had been hit by a heavy hammer. Their bodies trembled, and their eardrums were stinging. In the center of the field, the violent thunderbolts, the turbulent waves, and the ominous black gas were divided into two camps and collided with each other. For a moment the scene of the apocalypse was really brewing. Bang 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 bang. Thunderbolts smashed down from the sky one after another, and exploded the ground one after another. Boom! The waves raged wildly like stormy waves. In an instant they submerged the land and turned it into an ocean. Chi 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 chi. The power of death, which was enough to annihilate people's souls, filled the air like a black fog. The atmosphere seemed to be corroded, and there were bursts of evaporation sounds. Under the gaze of all the gods of the mythological forces, the thunderbolts, waves, and black gas in the collision rendered the whole wilderness like a storm in the dark night. Whether it was the scene or the momentum, it was enough to make the gods feel aghast. Of course, the more shocking thing was yet to come. Bang! In a muffled explosion, 3 figures flew out from the violent thunderbolts, the turbulent waves, and the tumbling black gas. Immediately, Noah's voice sounded. "What's wrong? Is this all you've got?" Then, in the center of the collision of the violent thunderbolts, the turbulent waves, and the ominous black gas, a streamer burst out and rushed into the sky. The body of the flowing light was naturally Noah. As Noah flew into the sky, he raised one of his hands high, and there were bursts of thunderbolts in his hand. Another cosmology that could imitate all the power of the opponent and superimpose it on himself allowed Noah to obtain the power of Zeus, the Greek god who controlled the sky. He could control thunderbolts at will. Not only that, but Noah also mixed Hades's power of death into the lightning, turning the violent lightning into a pitch-black color and exploding in his hand. Thus, the scene of pitch-black thunderbolts falling from the sky was imprinted in the eyes of all the gods present. Bastard! Hades clutched his broken sternum, his eyes glinting fiercely. The death energy on his body fluctuated even more violently. Under Hades's control, it turned into a black wave that covered an area of a few kilometers and surged into the sky. My power can be used like this? Zeus was slightly taken aback, but he didn't dare to be careless. He thrust the lightning spear in his hand forward, and immediately released a thunderbolt that rushed upward. Boom! The shocking roar resounded again, and the faces of the gods of the various mythological powers began to change. The power of Noah, Zeus, and Hades, who suddenly collided in midair, exploded like a star exploding, causing a strong light that was enough to burn people's eyes. It was mixed with a terrible shock wave that swept out in all directions. Under the dazzling light and terrible shock wave, the gods of the various mythological powers retreated again and again, almost retreating to the sky above the capital Lilith. However, all the gods still saw it. Under the dazzling light and terrible shock wave, the sea that submerged the surrounding area suddenly surged up like a monstrous wave and rushed toward the sky. The scale of the wave was larger than the thunderbolt released by Zeus and the vast black wave released by Hades. At the forefront of the wave, Poseidon, who was holding a golden trident, rushed toward the sky bravely, as if he was riding the wind and breaking the waves. "God Slayer, you can also take my trident." Poseidon laughed. Riding the surging waves, he rushed toward Noah without fear. The trident in his hand seemed to carry the entire sea, fluctuating with strong water vapor, and he swung it heavily in the direction of Noah. In response, Noah clenched his fist tightly, and thick water vapor fluctuated on his fist. It was as if the entire ocean was compressed in his palm, and he blasted it towards the trident that was swinging towards him without any fancy moves. Dong! Accompanied by the collision of the fist and the trident, a heavy sound of collision rang out, and a stormy wave suddenly appeared in midair, filling the whole world with sea water in an instant. At the same time, Zeus and Hades suddenly appeared on both sides of Noah. One held a thunderbolt, the other a law enforcement staff, and they both stabbed fiercely toward Noah. In the blink of an eye, violent lightning and ominous black gas erupted from the bodies of Zeus and Hades. The 3 most famous gods in Greek mythology surrounded Noah in a triangular formation. One was like the incarnation of thunder, one was like the incarnation of the sea, and the last one was simply the incarnation of death. They attacked Noah together. Roar! 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 In the roar, the 3 main gods of Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, respectively, rushed toward Noah with violent thunderbolts, shocking waves, and black gas of death. "Go away!" Noah shouted in a low voice. Not only did the another cosmology operate at full power, but even the 3rd perpetual motion machine was fully activated. All the power turned into a pure shock wave that shook from his body. This shock wave of pure power directly dispersed the thunderbolts, turbulent waves, and surging black gas that filled the sky. Immediately, the three gods, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, were all hit by the terrible power wave. Boom! A deafening muffled sound resounded through the clouds. Poochie! Zeus and Poseidon spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Crack! A few more of Hades's bones were broken. The three main gods of Greek mythology were suddenly seriously injured. They fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. It was only at this moment that the violent thunderbolts, waves, and black gas in the sky gradually dissipated, causing the apocalyptic scene to disappear completely. It was as if nothing had happened. However, looking at the three main gods of Greek mythology lying on the ground and moaning in grief, the gods of the mythological forces present were completely speechless. Looking at Noah, who was suspended in the air and still shining with brilliant starlight, all the gods' minds were blank. In just a few moves, the three most famous gods of Greek mythology had been defeated by Noah. Was this the power of a god-slayer? Ignoring the shock in the hearts of the gods present, Noah lowered his head and looked at Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon lying on the ground. His eyes flashed, and he suddenly descended and landed in front of Hades. You? Hades' heart trembled, and he spoke in a trembling voice without hesitation. You can't kill me. I am the god of the underworld. If I die, there will be no one to manage the underworld. The souls of the dead in the human world will have nowhere to go, and the human world will be in complete chaos. Is that so? Noah said lightly. Don't worry, I have no intention of killing you. You're the god who controls death. To you, death is not even worth mentioning. I've been thinking about how to teach you an unforgettable lesson. Since you've mentioned the matter of managing the underworld, that's perfect. I'll seal you in the underworld forever, and you'll never be able to take half a step out of it. From now on, you can focus on managing the underworld. What? Hades said in disbelief. You want to seal me? Seal a god? Are you trying to say that I can't do it? Noah curled his lips and smiled. Unfortunately, I don't only have the another cosmology. In addition to the another cosmology, that can imitate the power of objects other than humans, I also have another cosmology that can ignore any situation and seal natural gods. The red light in Hades' eye sockets trembled violently. In the next moment, without any hesitation, Hades abruptly turned around and rushed to the other side of the sky. Chapter 1895. It could seal the strongest species other than the pure-blooded dragon species into the fictional world, and it could only exert a having effect on the existence of the strongest species. However, as long as the natural gods and the elves of the planet were the opponents, they could overcome all the differences in strength and win. That was the virtual star Taisui. In the face of the natural gods and the elves of the planet, the absolutely invincible simulated star Atlas, another cosmology. This simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, had not been used for a long time. After all, except for the box court in other worlds, there were basically no existences like the gods and the elves. Even in the world of the God-Slayer, because the disobedient gods were individuals born from myths and legends, it would be better to say that they were spirits born from the stars of heaven and earth rather than gods. Therefore, the simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, named Su Xing Taisui, still could not be put to use. Of course, in addition to the gods and the elves, this simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, could also exert a having effect even if it was used on other races. Its ability could not be said to be not powerful. In the beginning, in the box court, Noah relied on this simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, to complete the miracle of sealing millions of gods in one fell swoop. It could be imagined how powerful this simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, was. Unfortunately, apart from Hakata in other worlds, there was no such thing as a spirit core. Therefore, the simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, called the virtual star Taisui, had never been used in the world outside the box court, and it had been sealed by Noah for a long time. However, now it was finally time for this simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, to shine again. The gods in this world were not like the gods in the world of the God-Slayer. They were like illusory spirits. Instead, they were real gods that were recorded in all kinds of myths. Even though there was still no so-called spiritual personality in this world, let alone the existence of star spirits, the ability of Shushing Taisui's another cosmology to unconditionally seal the innate gods could finally come in handy. Greek mythology was not like Celtic mythology, where most of the mythological forces were postnatal gods. In Greek mythology, the natural gods were the majority of existences. Unfortunately, Hades was a natural-born god. In other words, this god of the underworld was completely within the scope of the illusory star Taisui. Noah murmured in an extremely calm voice as he looked at Hades, whose entire body was wrapped in the power of death. His bones were cracked and broken, but he was shooting in the opposite direction as if he was crazy and was about to leave Noah's sight. Void Star Taisui activate. Suddenly, the brilliant starlight fluctuating on Noah's body stagnated. Like a galaxy, it converged on Noah's slowly extended palm. Let the universe revolve. Simulated star map, another cosmology. The dazzling starlight that gathered in Noah's hand suddenly shone brightly, illuminating the entire sky. It was like a tide that surged between heaven and earth. Not only was that light dazzling, it was also incomparably dazzling. However, most of the gods of the mythical powers present felt their hearts tremble, and a sense of fear arose from the depths of their hearts towards the dazzling starlight. It was an instinctive reaction. Their instincts told them that the light was extremely dangerous. And the gods who had this kind of instinctive reaction were all born gods. Then these gods saw what happened. Hades, who was fleeing for his life, was enveloped by the intoxicating starlight, and his figure suddenly slowed down. Ah! As if he had foreseen his end, Hades looked up at the sky and wailed, "No, no, 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 no." Amid a hysterical wail, Hades was directly engulfed by the dazzling starlight. Soon after, the dazzling starlight that illuminated the world gradually gathered into the shape of a sphere. With a tremor, it slowly drifted towards Noah, landing in Noah's hand. Tightly holding the sphere in his hand, Noah sneered, "You'll stay in your underworld until the end of the world." After saying that, Noah raised his other hand, which fluctuated with the power of Hades imitated by Avesta's another cosmology, and waved it towards the void. Poochie! Amidst a tearing sound, a crack was directly torn in space. That crack led to the underworld. With the power of Hades, the god of the underworld, Noah could naturally open the entrance to the underworld at any time and place. Under such circumstances, Noah threw the glowing sphere that sealed Hades into the crack of the underworld, letting it slowly disappear into the darkness. Then the crack began to close and finally disappeared completely. Clang! The starlight that bloomed on Noah's body finally dimmed little by little. At the same time, the powerful and terrible breath on Noah's body also disappeared little by little. And the power of the three most famous gods in Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, also disappeared. In the sky, the gods of the mythological forces witnessed one of the world's top 10 masters being sealed by Noah with a wave of his hand. Then they looked at Zeus and Poseidon, who were still lying on the ground, groaning in pain, and all fell silent. It was not until this moment that the anger in the hearts of all the gods toward Noah's arrogance faded like a tide, replaced by an uncontrollable fear. Another cosmology. Why this power that had never appeared before was born in this world, the gods did not know. However, there was one thing that the gods present understood. That was the man in front of them, who had defeated the three main gods of Greek mythology and sealed one of the world's top 10 masters with a wave of his hand, was indeed a real godslayer. With the power of the two simulated star Atlas, another cosmology, other than humans, no one could defeat him. No. In addition to being a godslayer, that man was also the current Red Dragon Emperor. It was still unknown whether there was an existence among the humans who could defeat this person at this time. When the gods were silent, Noah suddenly said such a sentence as if talking to himself. "Whether it's a peace treaty or not, it's up to you. I won't force you to pursue peace." However, if a person like that skeleton who backstabs you in the back appears in your mythological forces, Noah glanced in the direction of the gods. "At that time I won't show any mercy." After leaving such a sentence, Noah no longer paid attention to the gods from various myths and legends. His figure directly turned into a stream of light, soared into the sky, and disappeared on the other side of the sky. The gods could only look at the human who left without hesitation. In their hearts there was no longer any thought of the human looking down on the gods and feeling furious about it. They all looked at each other and were speechless for a long time. This scene was clearly seen by Syzax and Asashel at the side. At that moment the two of them also looked at each other and laughed bitterly. This was because the two of them could already predict what would happen next. Moreover, from today onwards, Noah would also be completely regarded as an existence that could not be offended by all the mythological forces in the world. After this battle, no one would doubt Noah's ability. They would doubt Noah's ability as a godslayer. Chapter 1896. Ha 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 ha. In the living room of the Jamonli's house, Asashel was laughing out loud. Those guys have finally compromised one by one. On a closer look, there were documents on the table in front of Asashel. Next to him, Syzax was holding a few documents in his hand. Looking at the signatures on them, the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. Celtic mythology, Hindu mythology, Egyptian mythology, Mount Meru, and even Greek mythology have submitted a request to conclude a peace treaty. I thought that after the previous incident, Greek mythology would be more difficult to settle. In fact, the first to submit a peace treaty was Greek mythology, Asashel said with a sigh. After all, they were the mythical forces that had the most direct experience of the power of the deicide. With that said, both Syzax and Asashel shifted their gazes and looked to the side. There, Noah was holding a cup of black tea and sipping it as if he had not heard anything. If someone who was not in the know were here and saw this scene, they might think that the fact that the mythical forces had finally agreed to conclude a peace treaty had nothing to do with Noah. But the person who really caused this situation was undoubtedly Noah. This is your purpose, isn't it? Asashel said impatiently. Gather all the mythical forces, and then take the unlucky Hades as an example. Tell all the mythical forces that you, the deicide, have the ability to annihilate all the gods alone. In this way, even if those mythical forces covet our faith, they can only give up obediently. Otherwise, if they really offend you, they'll drag the entire mythical force down with them. In this way, not only will we not have to worry about the covetous eyes of the other mythical forces, but in order to prevent those ignorant gods from offending you and causing the entire mythical force to suffer, those mythical forces can only choose to compromise and conclude a peace treaty with us, Syzax said with a laugh. With the relationship of the peace treaty, even if there's a chance, as the witness of all the mythical forces concluding a peace treaty, the deicide won't casually annihilate the entire mythical force, right? In the end, this is what we got. Asashel pointed at the documents on the table and couldn't help but laugh. All the mythical powers have submitted their applications for peace talks. Now all we need to do is to truly conclude the peace talks. All the mythical powers in the world will gather into one group. True world peace may still be a long way off, but if this continues, we will be able to see some light at the end of the tunnel when the disaster is eliminated. That's something you need to worry about. Noah shrugged. I'm just a loner. I can't care about the world's peace. It's better for me to be a good school teacher. It's best if no one comes to find trouble with me. How straightforward. Syzax was exasperated. Don't forget, you are now the witness of all the mythical forces. This matter is definitely related to you. Like you said, I'm just a witness. Noah curled his lips into a smile. When someone violates the peace agreement, I will have a job. The rest will be up to you. Syzax and Asashel could only look at Noah speechlessly. They didn't know what to say. Forget it. Your intervention has saved us a lot of trouble. Originally, only Northern Europe had concluded the peace talks with us. Now that all the mythical powers have agreed to the peace talks, it's already a great gain. We can't ask for more. Asashel scratched his head. However, you are now one of the top 10 powerhouses in the world. You don't really want to be a teacher in a school, do you? After the last battle with the three main gods of Greek mythology, and also showing the power of another cosmology, Noah successfully ranked among the top 10 in the world. Now, the recognized rankings of the various mythical powers were as follows. The infinite dragon god Orpheus, the god-slayer Noah Doria, the god of destruction Shiva, one of the three main gods of Hinduism, the god of protection Vishnu, one of the three main gods of Hinduism, the god of creation Brahma, one of the three main gods of Hinduism, the celestial emperor of Mount Meru Sakra, the thunder god in Norse mythology Thor, the god of the underworld in Greek mythology Hades, the sun god in Egyptian mythology Aten, the god of light in Celtic mythology Ruger. In other words, not only did Noah rank among the top 10 in the world, but he also jumped all the way to the second place just below Orpheus. However, that was to be expected. With the two another cosmology of Avesta and illusory star Tai Sui, Noah alone was enough to rival all the mythical powers, let alone a single god. Naturally, he would obtain the second place just below Orpheus. Of course, with the power of Avesta, it was reasonable to say that Orpheus, who was both a dragon and a god, would not be able to defeat Noah. Moreover, half of Orpheus' power was taken away, so it was possible for Noah to directly replace Orpheus' position. Unfortunately, Orpheus' invincibility had already been deeply rooted in people's hearts. Even if Noah showed an almost invincible power, there was still no way to easily replace Orpheus' position and become the strongest existence in the world. Therefore, Noah replaced the position of Fenrir, whose power was greatly weakened because of being enslaved by Wali, and entered the top 10 and jumped to the second place. Coincidentally, if Noah did not appear originally, the one who replaced Fenrir to enter the top 10 in the world would have been the king of monsters in Greek mythology Typhon. Typhon was a fire-breathing giant taller than a mountain. He had 100 snake heads, covered with feathers, and had a pair of wings. In Greek mythology, he was a legendary creature that gave birth to many terrifying monsters. When it came to the monsters that he gave birth to, many of them were famous. For example, the hellhound Cerberus, the Hydra, the Harpy, the chimera with the head of a lion and the body of a goat, the vulture that pecked at Prometheus, the half-lion and half-vulture Griffin, the two-headed hound Otzius, and the Nemean lion were all Typhon's children. Moreover, in Greek mythology, Typhon had once broken the tendons of Zeus' hands and feet. Later, Zeus brought the god of chaos Phobos, the god of fear Demos, the goddess of victory Nike, as well as the 4 gods of wind Auros, Shephalos, Notos, and Boreas to beat Typhon to the brink of death. In Greek mythology, it was even recorded that Typhon appeared in front of the gods. Except for Zeus and Athena, the other gods all turned into animals and fled in panic. From this, it could be seen how powerful this king of monsters was. Typhon was fully qualified to replace Fenrir's position and enter the top 10 in the world. However, Noah's appearance made Typhon lose this qualification. Of course, Noah himself knew that if he did not count the two another cosmology, in the situation of losing authority, sovereignty, and ability value, even with the power of Aster, Athena, and Drake, he was still much weaker than the world's top existences. In this regard, Noah had some ideas. If these ideas were realized, then by that time, even without the power of another cosmology, Noah would be able to sit firmly in the top 10. Therefore, in response to Asashel's words, Noah just glanced in the direction of Syzax. If you want to talk about the top 10 in the world, there is one more here. It's just that he has been keeping a low profile and doesn't show his strength. I'm already very satisfied with my current position. Syzax smiled indifferently. Moreover, I also have a job as the Demon King. I'm not idle. Aren't you guys just unhappy that I'm too idle? Noah rolled his eyes and put down the black tea in his hand. Say it. What do you want me to do? Syzax and Asashel looked at each other. Actually, at present, there is still a force that doesn't intend to conclude a peace treaty with us, Asashel said. I'm going to make a trip there. I hope you can come with me. Chapter 1897. At this moment, Noah was standing in the middle of a vast training ground. Noah lifted his eyes and looked to the front. He easily saw the figures of the 3 people who were lined up in a row in front of him. Across from Noah, Udu, Genova, and Irina were standing in a line. Although they were lined up in a straight line, there was actually some distance between the 3 of them, as if they were surrounding someone. Who were they surrounding? Of course it was Noah. Upon closer inspection, Udu, Genova, and Irina had serious expressions as they stared at Noah, as if they were facing a great enemy. Each of them had a sword that emitted a strange aura in their hands. Noah's gaze was more focused on the 3 swords than on Udu, Genova, and Irina. Of course, Noah clearly knew the origins of the swords in Udu, Genova, and Irina's hands. Genova was holding the holy sword that he had displayed during the summer break in the underworld Dyrandal. It was a holy sword that could cut through anything if it was unleashed to the extreme. Genova had not been able to fully control it. Even after a period of cultivation in the underworld, he had been using it recently. However, he was still unable to fully unleash the Holy Sword's power and reach the state of being able to cut through anything. However, since ancient times there were only a handful of people who could use Dyrandal to that extent. Therefore, it was only natural that Genova had not been able to fully control Dyrandal. Irina was also holding a holy sword in her hand. However, it wasn't the mimic holy sword that Elena had before. However, the holy sword on the other hand was fluctuating with a holy wave that was comparable to Genova's Dyrandal. This proved that it was also a legendary holy sword. As for Yudu, he was not holding a holy sword. Instead, he was holding a demon sword that was filled with demonic aura. The three swordsmen of the Jimenez clan held their extraordinary holy and demonic swords, but their expressions were more solemn than ever. Under such circumstances, Noah just clenched his hand, and the silver holy sword appeared in his hand, pointing diagonally to the ground. Buzz! A faint layer of brilliant white light circulated around the body of the silver holy sword, causing the surrounding air to become slightly chaotic. Undoubtedly, that was all there was to it. Yudu, Genova, and Irina, who were holding holy swords and demonic swords that were far more powerful than Noah's swords, felt their hearts clench, and their eyes turned solemn. Noah smiled calmly as he looked at Yudu, Genova, and Irina, who had extremely serious expressions on their faces. Alright, let's begin. Yudu, Genova, and Irina nodded and tightened their grip on their swords. The atmosphere in the air became tense. The three swordsmen of the Jimenez clan did not dare to act rashly. Their expressions were solemn as they stared at Noah, as if they were trying to find a flaw in Noah. In this regard, Noah appeared calm on the surface, but he could not help but laugh in his heart. Regardless of whether they could find a flaw or not, this stalemate would not last for long, right? If there was a reason, it was because one of the three swordsmen would definitely not be able to hold back an attack first. Just as this thought appeared in Noah's mind, a delicate voice sounded. Go! Dyrandal! Dyrandal in Genova's hand suddenly surged with holy flames. Immediately after, Genova raised the holy sword in his hand and heavily slashed down in Noah's direction. Wong! Along with a buzzing sound, the holy flames surging on Dyrandal's sword transformed into a sword wave. Like a cold blade of light, it pierced through the air and shot towards Noah's direction. Wherever the sword wave passed, the ground of the training ground seemed to have been ruthlessly sliced open and split into two. The attack of the legendary holy sword, which could cut through everything, was like a sword blade formed by energy, rushing in front of Noah. Faced with such a powerful slash that could cut a skyscraper in half, Noah only swung the holy sword in his hand. Clang! A sword light slashed through the air with a clear melodious sound. Poochie! The holy sword, which could break all curses and spells, sliced the oncoming sword wave in half, creating a sound that sounded like flesh being torn apart. Pung! The powerful sword wave that was sliced in half suddenly exploded like fireworks, scattering into specks of dim light. However, just behind the sword wave that had exploded, three black figures rushed straight over. They were like arrows that had left the bow, and their speed was extremely fast. Yudu rushed to the front. Just like Noah, he had anticipated that Genova would definitely not be able to hold back and would be the first to attack. He rushed towards Noah like a flash of lightning. Ha! Yudu shouted fiercely as he raised the devil's sword in his hand high up. Along with the sound of the air being torn apart, he brought along a sharp force and viciously slashed towards Noah's head from top to bottom. At the same time, Genova and Irina, who were rushing behind Yudu, suddenly separated. They nimbly tapped on the ground and flashed to Noah's left and right sides. The holy swords in their hands, one in front and one behind, cut through the air and violently slashed towards Noah. In an instant, Noah was surrounded by Yudu, Genova, and Irina in a triangular formation. He was enveloped by the holy sword and devil sword that carried holy wave and chilling devil chi. With such a pincer attack, not to mention a superior devil, even a superior devil would be severely injured if he was grazed by one of the swords. After all, the swords in their hands were not ordinary weapons. They were famous even in the legends. However, facing the pincer attack of the three legendary holy swords and devil swords, Noah only slightly raised the silver holy sword in his hand. Ultimate sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. A slash that resembled moonlight suddenly appeared, as if a full moon had suddenly expanded in this space and slashed in all directions. Clank! Along with the sound of metal clashing, the crescent-like slashes landed on the holy and demonic swords in the hands of Udu, Genova, and Irina at almost the same time. The terrifying force of the slashes sent the three of them flying. Oh! Ugh! Ah! Groans and cries of surprise rang out from the mouths of the three Jamanli family swordsmen, but they could not change the fate of their defeat. When Udu, Genova, and Irina stabilized their bodies and landed on the ground, before they could even raise their heads, a silver holy sword was pointed in front of them. That's the end of it. Noah had appeared in front of the three swordsmen out of nowhere and shrugged his shoulders. It's a pity that this time, you still didn't manage to make 3 moves. With that, Noah made the elven device in his hand disappear and returned to the gift card. Udu, Genova, and Irina looked at each other and sat down on the ground, paralyzed. We lost again? Udu said helplessly. As expected, it's still too early to think that you can win against teacher by just a move or two. That's right, Genova said weakly. For a swordsman this is a bit of a blow. I thought I would definitely be able to do it today. Irina simply lay on the ground, her plump upper body rising and falling with her breathing. Her delicate face was slightly puffed up as she muttered in dissatisfaction. It's all Genova's fault. He couldn't hold back and always attacked suddenly. This kind of attack pattern was seen through long ago. What? Genova frowned and glared at Irina. Are you blaming me? It's not that strange, Elena said insincerely. But, can't you think for a bit before attacking? You want to say that I didn't use my brain, right? Undoubtedly you're an idiot. What? Who are you calling an idiot? It's you. You were already an idiot in the past, and you've become even more idiotic after being reincarnated as a devil. Irina, you idiot. Genova is the idiot. Big idiot. The two swordsmen from the original church suddenly started arguing for no reason. Noah and Udu looked at each other speechlessly. Chapter 1898. It had been more than a month since the hero's sect's attack. Noah had been training the Jamanli's kin for the past month or so. There was no other reason other than the fact that Leah had brought her kin to Noah and solemnly asked him to train them. The reason for doing so was very simple. When the hero's sect attacked, not only were the Jamanli's kin of no help, but they were also taken down by the hero's sect as hostages to threaten Noah. In the end, half of Orpheus's power was taken away by the disaster squad. Afterward, when she learned of the matter, she felt extremely regretful and deeply understood the importance of strength. Hence, she personally brought her kin and asked Noah to train them. To be honest, Noah could understand Leah's thoughts. It was not as if Noah had never experienced the regret caused by the lack of strength. It just so happened that Noah also had some strength that he wanted to practice, so he agreed to Leah's request without any hesitation. As a result, Noah had been training the Jamanli's kin for the past month. Sometimes he was the opponent of Leah and Junai, engaging in actual combat with the two leaders of the Jamanli's kin. Sometimes, he was the guidance of his incarnation, correcting the swordsmanship of the three swordsmen, Udu, Genova, and Irina. Sometimes he relied on his rich experience traveling between worlds to impart his experience to Kitten, who was good at melee combat, and Aisha, who was good at healing. Sometimes he expressed his opinions on Label and Lasvia's fire magic and Norse magic, allowing them to understand magic and magic to a higher level. Even Gasper had received Noah's training. Fortunately, Noah had a variety of powers and treasures in the past, and had used a lot of abilities. Coupled with his extraordinary combat talent and powerful combat instincts from the Godslayer, even if the Jamanli's kin were good at different aspects, Noah taught them all. Although it had only been a little more than a month, it had to be said that the Jamanli subordinates were a group of very talented demons, and their fighting strength had clearly increased. This was especially true for Udu and Gasper, who had divine artifacts. The two of them had improved the most. Under Noah's training, the former had comprehended the forbidden move during a high-pressure battle. The latter's control over the divine artifact that could stop time was getting better and better. Even Noah, who had the curse resistance, had suffered a loss once. The improvement could be said to be great. Of course, apart from this, the Jamengli subordinates also had their own improvements. Noah looked at Genova and Irina, who were squabbling on the ground, as well as Udu, who had a helpless look on his face. Noah turned his head and looked in the other direction of the training ground. The training ground was located in an alternate dimension. It was a specialized training ground that Leah had asked her father to build for her. The entire area had been reinforced, and even superior demons would find it difficult to leave traces here. Even if there was damage, it would take less than a day for the damaged area to repair itself to its original state. This showed how advanced the demon realm's technology in creating training grounds was. Moreover, the area was quite vast, and everyone could occupy an empty space for their own training. At the moment, in an empty space not far from Noah, Leah and Junai were having a magic duel. Every time Liatha's destructive magic hit the ground would explode and blast a crater into the ground. Junai, on the other hand, was an expert in lightning attribute magic. With the bloodline of a fallen angel, he could manipulate the power of light. Combining lightning attribute magic and lightning attribute magic, he was constantly rampaging through the space. Just like Leah, he could easily leave deep craters on the ground. Clearly, in terms of destructive power, both Leah and Junai had far surpassed superior demons. In an empty space further away from Leah and Junai, Leah and Lothias were also engaged in a fierce battle. Leah was the rightful heir of the Phoenix family. Not only did she have a unique advantage in fire attribute magic, but she also had an immortal body and was very difficult to deal with. However, Lothias was the Valkyrie of Norse mythology. She was also a talented woman who was proficient in all sorts of Norse magic and spells, especially the omnidirectional bombardment of elemental magic. The power of her spells was shocking, and she was a cut above Leah and Junai. If it wasn't for the Phoenix, most superior demons would not be able to withstand such ferocious attacks. Compared to the intense battle between Leah, Junai, Label, and Losvias, the clearing occupied by Aisha, the kitten, and Gasper's party was strangely quiet. The three of them were sitting neatly in a row on the ground, eyes closed as they meditated. Aisha and Gasper were meditating to deepen their understanding of the divine item, hoping to draw out more of the item's power. This method of using meditation to deepen one's understanding of the artifact was not taught by Noah, but by Athena. Having created a man-made divine item once, Athena's understanding of divine items far surpassed Noah's, and teaching him the trick to using the divine item's power was a piece of cake. The kitten, on the other hand, was calmly experiencing the flow of chi between her body and nature. That way, she would be able to use immortal spells better, and her combat ability would naturally increase. Yudu, Genova, and Irina were the ones who received Noah's guidance most often. After all, compared to mana, magic, divine items, and immortal spells, Noah's understanding of swordsmanship was unquestionably the highest. With that being the case, the swordsman among the three Jimenez's kin was naturally the one who received Noah's training the most. Still, Genova's Dilindar aside, I didn't expect that a demon would be using the king's sword as well. How strange. The king's sword. It was torn apart during the ancient war, and was then forged into 7 holy swords with different abilities. Even in the legends they were very famous. In the past, Genova and Irina had used the Holy Sword of Destruction and the Holy Sword of Mimicry respectively. Noah had also obtained a Holy Sword of Heaven Flash, but that was only a part of the king's sword. Not long ago, the angels claimed to have found the last holy sword that they couldn't find before, and with the help of Asashal's power, they obtained the holy sword. Thus, Michael made the decision to retrieve the 7 holy swords and reforge them. Finally, the king's sword could see the light of day again. After that, Michael gave the king's sword to Irina. Thus, the holy sword in Irina's hand was no longer an incomplete holy sword, but a complete king's sword. As for Yudu, Noah turned his gaze and looked at the demonic sword in Yudu's hand. Is that Gelamo? Gelamo. It was also known as the Demon Overlord sword. In Wally's team, the descendant of the Night King of Great Britain, Arthur, held the strongest holy sword, the king's sword. The Demon Overlord sword was the strongest demonic sword that could rival the king's sword. This demonic sword was now in Yudu's hands. The Demon Overlord sword was originally the sword of Siegfried of the Heroes faction, Yudu said with a complicated expression. When the Heroes faction attacked, I fought with him and was no match for him at all. However, at that time, the Demon Overlord sword seemed to have faintly shown signs of recognizing me as its master. After that, Siegfried was defeated by the swordsman who had the king's sword, causing the demon overlord's sword to completely betray him. Under such circumstances, knowing that the demon overlord's sword had shown signs of recognizing Yudu as its master, Syzax handed the demon overlord's sword to Yudu. If it's possible, I hope to fight with the previous owner of Gelamo again. I've always been brooding over the crushing defeat that time. Yudu revealed a fearless smile. However, since Siegfried has been captured, my goal is to defeat the owner of the king's sword who defeated him. One day, I'll use this demon overlord sword to defeat the owner of the king's sword and prove that I'm stronger than Siegfried. It had to be said that Yudu, who spat out these words with his handsome face, was really very stylish. It was definitely enough to charm the love-struck fools in Fogeyman Academy. However, if those love-struck fools knew that Yudu would regularly go to Hyoto Issei's house to cook for him every day, what would they think? Chapter 1899. Just like that, Noah fought a few more battles with the demons of the Jamanli's kin before the special training for the day came to an end. Thank you for your hard work, teacher. The Jamanli's kin lined up neatly as if they were in a physical education class and bowed to Noah. That was their daily routine. Thank you for your hard work too. Noah nodded and spoke. By the way, I may be going on a long trip soon. I don't know how long it will take, so once I'm gone, you can train according to your own pace. All of the Jamengli family members were stunned upon hearing this. Isha tilted her head and said with an innocent expression, "Teacher, are you going on a long trip? Do you need me to prepare your lunch?" "No need." Noah shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Don't worry about my 3 meals. It will be taken care of when I get there. Besides, I have prepared a lot of food and water in my gift card. I won't starve to death." The rest of the Jamanli's kin smiled, but they found Isha's naivety quite cute. But soon, her expression turned serious. "Teacher, are you going to the vampire's territory?" "That's right." Noah did not hide it and nodded directly. Now, all the mythical forces have reached a peace agreement. Only the vampires have not expressed their stance, and have even shown very obvious signs of resistance. Previously, because the other mythical forces had not reached a peace agreement, Syzax and Asashel wanted to focus their energy on that side for the time being, so they could only be in a stalemate with the vampires. Now it's time for a showdown. As early as more than a month ago, Asashel had asked Noah to go with him to the vampires' territory. But before that, the peace agreement with the other mythical forces had to be reached first. Only after dealing with this matter perfectly could Asashel be free. Just yesterday, Asashel contacted Noah. The conclusion of the peace agreement between the various mythical forces had reached the final stage, and the coordination and cooperation in all aspects had been finalized. In the next few days, they should be able to set off for the vampires' territory. I believe that now that all the forces have reached a peace agreement, and only the vampires are left alone, they won't ignore this matter anymore, right? Noah curled his lips. Otherwise, when the time comes, the vampires will not be enemies with one force alone, but with the forces of the world. That being said, it was definitely impossible to force them, or rather, it was meaningless. How could there be peace through coercion? Since it was for the sake of world peace, then coercion was absolutely out of the question. Therefore, as the governor of the fallen angels, Ashel felt that it was necessary for him to personally to show his sincerity. In addition, with the Godslayer as a witness accompanying him, presumably, the vampires would have to seriously consider the peace agreement, right? Asashel also said that if you want to go with him, it's also possible. Noah turned his gaze to one of the Jamanli's kin. After all, we also have people who have some connections with the vampires, don't we? Hearing Noah's words, the Jamanli's kin gathered their gazes on Gasper. No. Gasper shook his head very fiercely, tears even welling up in his eyes. I don't want to meet the other vampires. I don't want to go to the vampires' territory either. Looking at Gasper's violent reaction, he believed that anyone could have noticed it, right? This hybrid of vampire and human had a past and memories that were unbearable to recall. That's it, teacher. Laius touched Gasper's head, who looked like he was about to cry, and sighed regretfully. Considering Gasper's mood, we can't go with him. I know. Noah spread his hands. Originally, I just wanted to expand your horizons, and Gasper's identity as a vampire, so I thought of letting you follow. I'm not forcing you. Minister, Gasper said dejectedly. I'm sorry. Don't mind it, Gasper, Laius said gently. You're my lovely servant. It's natural for me to think of you. To us, Gasper is irreplaceable. Junai also showed his gentle side. You don't have to apologize for this kind of thing. The rest of the Jamanli's kin also comforted him, and Gasper was touched. Then it's decided that you Jamanli's kin will not participate. Noah clapped his hands, attracting everyone's attention. I'll go alone from our side, and Asashel doesn't seem to bring any guards. It seems that this time, it's just me and Asashel accompanying each other. In my opinion, if teacher and the viceroy are together, then there's no need for guards, Laius said sincerely. But if you need someone to accompany you, why don't you bring Sidi's kin? Kangna. Noah thought for a while and nodded. Then you contact Kangna and ask her what she thinks. Anyway, there are still a few days before we depart. Understood. Laius agreed without hesitation. Thus, the group of people disbanded. By the way, in the corner of the training ground, Orpheus had been sitting on a bench, eating snacks while watching everyone train. That was Orpheus' favorite thing to do. Of course, Orpheus' favorite thing to do was not to stay silent, but to silently observe the actions of the people around him. Sometimes he would even imitate them. She looked just like a child who was learning how to walk. Although her tender and cute face did not show any emotion, she still gave people a very cute feeling. After everyone was dismissed, Noah looked at Orpheus, who was sitting in the corner, and sighed in his heart. If it was anyone else and half of their strength had been taken away, they would have already lost their heads and tried to find a way to regain their lost strength. However, Orpheus did not care about his own power at all. Ever since half of his power was taken away more than a month ago, he was still living a carefree life as before. The only thing that changed was that Orpheus no longer talked about defeating the real Emperor Crimson Dragon, and seemed to have given up on that goal. After all, Orpheus had not only lost half of his power, but also went from infinite to limited. Compared to his heyday, he was much weaker. Under such circumstances, with Orpheus' current power, if he were to face the real Emperor Crimson Dragon, he would definitely not be able to survive 3 moves even if he was not killed instantly. But even so, Orpheus, who had only half of his power left and had gone from infinite to limited, was still the strongest in the world. Now that Orpheus had lost his infinite power, he had slid down from 3 digits but did not fall to 4 digits. In other words, Orpheus was now in between 3 digits and 4 digits. He was weaker than 3 digits but stronger than 4 digits. It was a very ambiguous realm. In the past, even if the rest of the top 10 in the world joined forces, they would not be able to defeat Orpheus in one move. Now, although Orpheus was still the strongest in the world, the gap between them was not as wide as before. If possible, I should help Orpheus get back his lost power, Noah thought to himself. Even if Orpheus doesn't care, I can't let his power be used by the disaster squad. Moreover, Noah was also very concerned about the half of power that Orpheus had lost. That was because the disaster squad was preparing to use that half of his power to create a clone of Orpheus. Maybe I'll have to make another Orpheus an enemy in the future, Noah sighed. At this moment, Orpheus, who was sitting quietly in the corner eating snacks, suddenly stopped what he was doing and raised his head to look up. Noah noticed this detail and was stunned for a moment before he walked forward. What's wrong? Orpheus? Orpheus retracted his gaze and turned to Noah. Obviously, to Orpheus, Noah was more important. Then Orpheus spoke. There's the aura of an evil dragon. Noah narrowed his eyes slightly when he heard that. Chapter 1900. The training space for the Jamanli's family was connected to the Supernatural Research Department's office in Colt King Academy through a fixed teleportation formation. Therefore, when Noah moved out of the training space and arrived at the Paranormal Research Department's office, he came out of the office and arrived at the empty space outside the old school building. His superb sensing ability allowed him to sense an evil presence. The aura was very weak, but it wasn't hidden at all. It seemed like the owner of the aura was quite a distance away from Colt King Academy. However, Noah, who had superb senses, could still sense the aura clearly no matter how difficult it was to detect it. Noah's feelings seemed to have been transmitted to Draeger's body, causing Draeger's voice to sound in Noah's mind. This is the aura of an evil dragon? Evil dragon? Noah was slightly taken aback before he asked. What's that? A type of dragon? Rather than a type of dragon, it's more like a name for a specific type of dragon. Draeger explained. In the dragon clan, those extremely dangerous and uncontrollable creatures are called that. There are also some terrifying existences that appear in various myths and legends. Dragons that appear in various myths and legends. Noah frowned. Seeing this, Draeg explained. For example, Dark Dragon of the New Moon Krumkruch, Forbidden Dragon of the Mana Source Izidahaka, Dark Dragon of the Primordial Apophis, Violent Dragon of the Great Sin Grendel, Guardian Dragon of the Precious Tree Laden, and so on. They are all very famous evil dragons in various myths and legends. Needless to say, they are extremely dangerous. Especially Krumkruch, Izidahaka, and Apophis. One of them killed the king of the gods in Celtic mythology, one of them is an evil god in the Zoroastrianism, and the last one tried to seal the entire world in Egyptian mythology into darkness. There was no need for a detailed explanation. Just by listening to Drake's explanation, one could tell how dangerous the three evil dragons were. This was especially so for Noah, who was very knowledgeable about all kinds of myths and legends. He knew just how terrifying these three evil dragons were. Of course, that was in myths and legends. In the real world, or rather in this world, it was not enough to know how powerful the evil dragons were. Noah asked, how is the evil dragon's strength compared to you, a heavenly dragon who is ranked among the top 10 in the world? If you're referring to when I was alive, then I'm naturally stronger as a sky dragon. A sky dragon is an existence that surpasses all other dragons and is only below the dragon god, Draeg said as if he was talking about someone else. However, the weakest of the legendary level evil dragons mentioned just now are at least at the Dragon King level. Clone Kua Azidahaka and Apophis are all at the top of the Dragon King level, just below the Heavenly Dragon level. If the opponent is just an ordinary god, it should be possible to kill one or two of them, right? Dragons with the title of Dragon King were at least at the Demon King level. In other words, the Dragon Kings were all at the top of the 5 digits. As for the 3 representative evil dragons that Draeg mentioned, there were at least 4 digits of them. After all, these 3 evil dragons were not weaker than the gods in their respective myths and legends. As a result, Noah was puzzled. How come I've never heard of such powerful dragons? To be more precise, he had never heard of their activities in this world. Otherwise, the number and ranking of the 5 great dragon kings would change. In response, Draeg only sighed. There's nothing strange about it. Even the 2 heavenly dragons were killed and sealed, so how could the evil dragons be left alone? The so-called evil dragons were extremely cruel and uncontrollable, so they were all sealed and destroyed. Even one of the 5 great dragon kings was sealed, and his soul was cut into several pieces and lodged in several divine artifacts. It was even worse than the 2 heavenly dragons. At this point, Draeg was confused again. But why would the aura of the evil dragons, which should have been sealed and destroyed, appear again? Draeg's confusion was the same as Noah's. No matter what, let's go and find out, Noah said decisively. The aura of the evil dragons is so dense, it won't be hard to find them. Be careful, partner. Draeg immediately said. The evil dragons are extremely difficult to deal with. Even we, the dragon race, avoid them like the plague. Those guys' brains are basically all damaged and none of them are mentally sound. You definitely won't lose to the evil dragons, but it's disgusting to be entangled with them. If you really fight, don't show any mercy and kill them cleanly. From Draeg's words, one could tell how great the evil dragon's ability to attract hatred was. Moreover, not only did he say that the evil dragons were troublesome, he even said that they were disgusting. It was clear that even the sky dragons didn't want to deal with the evil dragons. Noah naturally didn't want to be disgusted by the evil dragons for nothing, but the fact that the evil dragons released their aura so brazenly meant that they didn't care about the forces stationed in Chariot King Town. Just the fact that the evil dragons were at least at the level of a Dragon King or Demon King was already a huge problem. Therefore, if the evil dragons were as annoying and disgusting as Draeger described them to be, then there's no need for me to show any mercy. Noah muttered to himself. Then he thought of Laias and the others and turned to Orpheus. Orpheus, I'll go and deal with the evil dragons. Can you help me protect the people of Jiming's family? Hearing that, Orpheus looked up and met Noah's gaze and nodded. In the next second, Orpheus disappeared without a trace. It was as if he had merged into the night, and even his aura had completely vanished. Noah was relieved. His body flashed and he disappeared as well. He turned into a streak of light and shot into the sky, heading in a certain direction. At this time, the sky had already darkened. Noah and the Jiming's family members had always been training after school. They would attend classes as usual and enter the training space immediately after school. Naturally, they had to continue training until night time, with the exception of holidays. Noah flew through the night sky, braving the chilly night wind. His sensory ability spread out like a domain, enveloping his surroundings. Noah firmly grasped the trace of the evil dragon's aura in the air, and with the feedback from his sensory ability, he rushed in the direction of the aura. As Noah flew, the trace of the evil dragon's aura in the air became denser, proving that Noah was heading in the right direction. However, just as Noah was about to reach the location of the aura, the owner of the aura suddenly moved. The other party had sensed that someone was approaching them. In other words, the other party had discovered Noah's arrival. However, under such circumstances, not only did the other party not flee in a hurry, but they suddenly charged in Noah's direction at an astonishing speed. Noticing this, Noah raised an eyebrow and stopped in his tracks. At the same time, Dalag's voice rang out in Noah's mind. "They're here." Noah saw Dalag's voice as soon as he finished speaking. In the night sky in front of him, a gigantic black shadow suddenly appeared. Roar! A thunderous roar turned into a sound wave that reverberated throughout the night sky of Chariot King Town. After the roar, the other party's loud laughter rang out. "Someone actually took the initiative to come to me? That's great. I didn't act on my own accord. It's an enemy attack. I have to face them head-on." With such loud laughter, the black shadow was like a gigantic meteor, bringing with it the sound of the wind. Amidst the roar and laughter that had yet to completely subside, it charged straight in Noah's direction without any deviation. That momentum was like a fighter jet charging straight at Noah's direction. Even though it was still hundreds of meters away, the strong wind from the impact blew fiercely, causing Noah's robes to flutter. In response, Noah only narrowed his eyes slightly, and his entire body began to fluctuate with an extremely dense aura. The distance between the two instantly reduced to zero. Chapter 1901. Dong! In the sky above Chariot King Town, the originally calm night sky suddenly trembled with a thunderous boom, causing a shockwave to sweep out like a violent gale, stirring up the atmosphere. It was extremely shocking. Amidst the boom, two figures, one big and one small, flew out from the epicenter of the shockwave, creating friction in the air. Amidst the sharp sound of the shockwave breaking through the air, they opened up a distance of more than 100 meters before they could stabilize themselves. Noah's body shook as he froze in midair. He felt a slight numbness all over his body as he raised his head and looked forward. Only then did Noah get a good look at his opponent. It was a giant. That's right, a giant. However, this giant had a ferocious dragon head, sharp dragon claws, and a thick dragon tail. There was also a pair of dragon wings on its back that were slightly larger than its body. It looked like a giant draconian. Its height easily exceeded 30 meters, which was many times larger than Noah. Its scales were light black. Its eyes were light silver. However, there were dark green ripples on his body. From the waves, Noah felt an evil presence. In the eyes of the giant, Noah felt a suffocating madness. Glendale! Draeger's shocked voice rang in Noah's mind. It's him. Glendale? Noah stood up in surprise and finally looked at the giant draconian. He's Glendale? The Tyrannosaurus Rex of Great Sin Glendale. It was one of the legendary evil dragons that Draeger had mentioned before. Speaking of this evil dragon, one had to mention a Norse hero, Beowulf. He was very famous in Norse mythology as a hero who had slain 3 monsters in his life. Glendale was one of the monsters that Beowulf had slain. The giant seemed to be able to hear Draeger's voice. Its scale-covered eyelids trembled slightly as it spoke in surprise. This voice is so familiar. Don't tell me it's Draeger? It's me. Draeger's voice began to come from Noah's body. I didn't expect you to remember me. I thought you didn't have anything else in your head other than fighting. What? Does that mean it's really Drake? Glendale's voice sounded more and more surprised. What's wrong? Why are you hiding in a little guy's body? Are you not going to come out? You're still as rude as before. Drake's tone was unusually displeased. Undoubtedly, you were killed by the first Beowulf. Why did you suddenly revive? That kind of thing doesn't matter at all. Glendale's silver eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Compared to that, Drake, since you're already here, hurry up and come out. Let's have a long-awaited battle. Seeing Glendale's aura turning violent, Noah frowned and told Drager, "Are you old acquaintances? It's just that annoying guy back then pestered me and I taught him a lesson." Drager said, "That guy is a lunatic who has nothing in his mind other than fighting. But in terms of strength, I'm afraid that he can surpass more than half of the current 5 great dragon kings. Partner, when you fight with that guy, you don't need to hold back. Otherwise, you will really be entangled by him until you die." From Drager's constant emphasis on don't have to be merciful, one could tell how difficult it was to deal with the evil dragon named Glendale. Not in terms of strength but in terms of spirit. If you don't beat him until he can't stand up, he won't let you go. Drager's voice was filled with disgust as if he was deeply hurt. "That's why you'd better use your forbidden technique and completely crush that guy." Before Noah could react to Drager's words, Glendale on the other side yelled in agitation, "Crush me? Good. Come and try. Hurry up and crush me. Hurry up." Along with the laughter, Glendale was the first to lose his patience. After roaring, he flapped his dragon wings, stirring up a strong gust of wind, and shot towards Noah. Undoubtedly, Glendale's speed was faster than a bullet despite his enormous size. The sharp sound of air breaking rang out again. The huge body stirred up waves of air as it charged forward. It rushed in front of Noah with a great momentum and raised one of its dragon hands high up in the air. Immediately after, Glendale clenched his hand into a fist. Unlike ordinary dragons who fought with their sharp dragon claws, Glendale was like a giant. Amidst the whistling sound, Glendale fiercely threw a punch at Noah. Wherever that punch passed, the air was completely squeezed clean. It was accompanied by a shocking sonic boom as it heavily smashed down like a mountain. Under that punch, Noah was simply like an ant. He was pitifully small and couldn't even compare to Glendale's fist. Thus, in Noah's vision, that enormous fist was like a dark patch of sky, falling towards him. Feeling the terrifying might of that simple punch, Noah had reason to believe that even if a mountain was hit, it would crumble into pieces. That was truly a blow that could split a mountain. A blow from a legendary evil dragon was so terrifying. However, in the face of such a blow, Noah's eyes didn't waver in the slightest. Instead, he raised his own fist and viciously punched out. He didn't use magic. After losing his ability value, Noah's body had regressed to the level of a human. Under the situation where he didn't use any magic, he used an ordinary punch to welcome the blow of the dragon that was as heavy as a mountain and as powerful as a meteor. In the next second, the two fists of different sizes, one big and one small, collided with a loud bang. Dong! A thunderous sound echoed through the night sky, penetrating through the horizon. The surging shockwave shook the entire heaven and earth. Then, just like at the beginning, the center of the shockwave, one big and one small figure flew out like they were struck by lightning. The sharp sound of breaking through the air echoed, stirring up the atmosphere. Once again, they pulled apart a few hundred meters before coming to a stop. They were evenly matched. Glendale looked at Noah's direction in astonishment. Of course, Noah was unharmed from head to toe. He wasn't at a disadvantage in the slightest. "Oh, is this for real?" Glendale asked in a daze. "A human's fist is actually evenly matched with mine?" As he muttered to himself, Glendale's enormous body started to tremble. It wasn't because of trembling but because of excitement. "Is this for real? Is this for real? Is this for real?" Glendale was so excited that he started to talk like a madman. "Is that still a human? Is that still a human? Even that bastard Beowulf wouldn't dare to take my fist head on, right? What? There's actually such a great human. Bastard! If those who knew about Noah's situation saw this scene, they would be equally shocked. It would have been fine if Noah had used his enhanced magic, but without enhanced magic, Noah's body that had reverted back to the human realm should have been smashed into minced meat by Glendale's punch. In the end, Noah was able to take the legendary evil dragon's fist head-on, and he wasn't at a disadvantage. This was Noah's harvest after more than a month. Gazing at Glendale, who was laughing maniacally, Noah slowly clenched his numb fists. His brows slightly furrowed as he muttered to himself, "So hard." It was indeed very hard. With Noah's current arm strength, his fist didn't even break Glendale's scales. Instead, his palm felt numb. This was enough to prove the toughness of Glendale's scales. Glendale's scales are famous for their toughness. It's the toughest among all dragons. Back then, I was only able to shatter his scales after increasing my strength. Drake said, "I told you to use Forbidden Hand. Otherwise, you'll only be entangled by that madman. Forbidden Hand is the highest level of divine equipment. Wouldn't it be too cheap to use it casually?" Noah's eyes flickered. "Why don't you let me try out my new strength?" Chapter 1902. In fact, Noah had wanted to solve the drawbacks of strengthening magic for a long time. At the beginning, Noah became a god slayer. Because of his physique, it led to the mutation of his authority. Even the magic he mastered was no longer attached to the root of the world of the shaped moon. It no longer needed to be connected to the magic baseplate, and became independent from the magic of the shaped moon world. Under such circumstances, Noah's magic was no longer limited by the root of the shaped moon world, and could develop independently. Under the stimulation of the infinite magic brought by the third perpetual smart personality, it had the amazing effect of strengthening the user's physical ability to the 5-digit peak level. It could be regarded as a miracle. However, there was a drawback of this strengthening magic. No, that's not right. There was no drawback of strengthening magic itself. It's just that when using this magic, if Noah wanted to get the power comparable to the 5-digit peak, then he needed to use all the magic he could control to strengthen it. Once there was less magic support, the degree of strengthening would also decrease. The result was that once Noah used strengthening magic, there was no way to use the other powers that needed to be stimulated. For example, the Elven device. When Noah used the Elven device, he needed to convert his own energy into divine might. Therefore, once the Elven device was used, the strengthening magic that needed magic support could not be used. Of course, that referred to the situation when Noah fully stimulated the power of the Elven device. Noah could convert his own energy into magic and divine might at the same time, and use magic and the Elven device at the same time. However, it was said before that controlling one type of energy alone was undoubtedly more convenient than controlling two types of energy at the same time. If the difficulty was reduced, the more energy could be used, and the stronger the power that Noah could exert. In this way, if he used two types of energy at the same time, it would be better to use one type of energy, that way he could be stronger. This caused Noah to be unable to use the other powers when using strengthening magic, unless he reduced the power of strengthening. That was undoubtedly a drawback. Therefore, when Noah used the Elven device, he used the body enhancement effect of the absolute sword skill to enhance his physical abilities instead of using it together with magic enhancement. Otherwise, Noah would have been able to defeat Lotus and Nubia easily. He didn't even need to activate the Another Cosmology to deal with the 3 Mad Elf Kings. Otherwise, he would have been able to deal with them easily. In view of this, Noah had always wanted to solve this problem so that he could use the rest of his power while using enhancement magic. After more than a month of research, Noah finally succeeded. At this time in Noah's body, endless energy was flowing in an orderly manner. It was like a cycle forming a pattern of electric wires. It was exactly the same as the magic patterns that were added to the target of the enhancement spell when it was activated. Noah borrowed the magic and magic of this world and used rituals and tactics to reproduce the magic power of demons, so that his energy was no longer simply stored in his body like before. Instead, it circulated like veins, forming the magic patterns to activate enhancement magic. Simply put, it was using the energy in his body to draw a magic array. In this way, as long as the energy in Noah's body was not exhausted, the enhancement magic would continue to work forever. Does it sound familiar? That's right, it's a perpetual motion machine. Only Noah, who had the third perpetual smart personality, could do permanent strengthening. Now the endless energy in Noah's body has been fixed to flow in this cycle. No matter which type of energy Noah converted, the enhancement magic could always be used passively. Although the energy that needed to be consumed would still be consumed, it would change from active to passive. This meant that Noah no longer had to be distracted to control it, and could use the energy in his body to use other powers. In addition, the energy in Noah's body also had the characteristic of being converted at any time. Not only could it convert into magic power, divine power, and even divine might at will, but it could also convert any energy in Noah's memory. Because it could only convert energy, Noah did not pay much attention to this characteristic in the past. However, after returning to this world, Noah realized that he was wasting God's gift. Because the magic power of demons and the light power of angels were also a type of energy. However, the magic power of demons could be added to their attributes through imagination, turning into storms, flames, lightning, and other attacks. The light power of angels had the characteristic of shaping, condensing into various shapes such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on. If Noah converted the energy into the magic power of demons and the light power of angels, would he have these two powers? The answer yes. However, on this basis, Noah made some adjustments. Looking at Glendale's ecstatic appearance of wanting to rush over again, Noah's mind moved, and the energy flowing in his body instantly transformed. What did it transform into? Divine power. Ever since his authority had entered a state of upgrade, he could no longer use divine power. The resplendent golden shockwave suddenly vibrated from Noah's body, spreading out in all directions like a hurricane. Shortly after, within that resplendent golden shockwave, a spear of light suddenly condensed, flashing with dazzling radiance. Like a military formation, it filled the entire space around Noah. It was not a spear of light condensed from the power of light, but a spear of light condensed from divine power. Fallen angels were the form of angels after they fell. Angels were life forms created by God using divine power. In other words, the source of light power was the power of God. Noah's divine power also came from God, and in terms of grade and rank, it was definitely higher than light power. Therefore, Noah added the shape-shifting characteristic of the power of light to his divine power, allowing his divine power to also possess the shape-shifting characteristic. What was the difference between a spear of light condensed from divine power that was one level higher than light power, compared to the spears of light of angels and fallen angels? The answer could be seen from the huge spears of light that filled the space around Noah, as well as Glendale's abrupt laughter that stopped abruptly. The next moment, the spears of light that were far larger than Glendale's body were like flashes of light, piercing through the vast sky and shooting towards Glendale's direction. Glendale's face was filled with shock, feeling the power contained in the huge spears of light. Without thinking, he raised his arms in front of him and made a defensive posture. Bang 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 bang. The huge spears of light that covered the sky and earth crashed onto Glendale's huge body, triggering a series of explosions that shook the space. Flames and strong light appeared in midair and gradually expanded. Oh! Glendale's anguished howls resounded in the midst of the flames and strong light. Then, an astonishing shock wave blasted out from the center of the explosion, dispersing the intense flames and dazzling light. Glendale seemed to have fallen into a berserk state as he frantically swung his fists, smashing away the huge spears of light that were attacking him. Upon closer inspection, the scales on Glendale's body were actually oozing with blood. This proved that Glendale wasn't able to completely withstand the wave of spears of light with the hardness of his scales. So Glendale switched from defense to offense. As he punched away the incoming spears of light, he flapped the dragon wings on his back and charged toward Noah at an astonishing speed, bringing with him a frightening aura of malice and evil. You actually broke through my scales? Undoubtedly, you're just a lowly human. Again. His injuries didn't enrage Glendale. Instead, he became more and more ecstatic. He roared loudly as he swung his fist, ignoring the scales on his fist that were gradually cracking. Then, he charged towards Noah without hesitation. Seeing this, Noah only sneered and raised his hand. The divine power that surged from Noah's body immediately surged and turned into chains of light. Like pythons, they suddenly shot out and met Glendale. Chapter 1903. In the blink of an eye. Just as Glendale was about to strike Noah with all his might, the nimble python-like chains of light formed from divine power cut through the air and arrived in front of Glendale. Drake had said that the evil dragon's mind was filled with nothing but battle. It was a complete lunatic. No one would want to be entangled by such a lunatic. However, in Noah's opinion, this lunatic was the easiest to deal with. This was because Noah was certain that Glendale would only rely on his instincts and impulses in battle. He definitely wouldn't use his brain. That was why Noah had predicted that Glendale would charge straight at him. Just like that, while Glendale was still swinging his fists and smashing away the gigantic light spears, the chains of light silently swept past him. Before Glendale could react, a series of thick chains of light wrapped around the evil dragon's gigantic body and bound it tightly in the air. Tisk! Glendale smacked his lips in disdain. What's the use of this thing? While spitting out such arrogant words, Glendale exerted strength all over his body. All the muscles under his scales bulged and his veins popped out one after another. Roar, roar, roar! Amidst the roar, Glendale burst out in rage, tugging at the chains of light that wrapped around his body. The chains rattled loudly, and even the sound of steel cracking could be heard. However, under such circumstances, not only did the thick chains of light not break, they even tightened around Glendale's gigantic body without showing any signs of breaking. What? Glendale was finally shocked. You can't tear it apart? Tear it apart? Noah laughed sarcastically. If it was just the ordinary power of light, perhaps with your strength, you could even tear apart the light of Asashel and Michael. Unfortunately, I am not using the power of light. I am using a divine power of a higher level than that. You? It's impossible to tear it apart. After saying that, Noah slowly raised his hand. Wang! The surging divine power gathered in Noah's hand and gradually formed a bow of light. Noah's deep, dark eyes stared straight at Glendale, who was struggling to break free from the shackles of the chains of light. With a calm expression, he pulled the bowstring. The surging divine power once again converged. As Noah drew the bow, it formed an extremely dazzling arrow of light. Your scales seem to be the hardest scales of the Dragon Clan, right? Noah said faintly. Then let me see if your scales are harder than my arrow of light. As soon as he finished speaking, whoosh! The dazzling arrow of light was like a resplendent meteor, streaking across the deep night sky, dragging a long tail of light behind it. Amidst the sharp sound of breaking through the air, it disappeared in a flash. Roar! 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 Glendale roared angrily. Under Glendale's furious roar, the dazzling arrow of light swept over and landed heavily on the dragon's body. Dong! In that instant, in the pitch-black moonlit night, a burst of strong light suddenly appeared. It was as if a full moon had exploded in midair, triggering a loud sound and violent impact that swept through the clouds of Chariot King Town. The clouds were extremely fragile and scattered. The atmosphere was cleanly and neatly disrupted. Even the space was like the surface of a lake that had a huge rock thrown into it. Under the violent impact and intense sound waves, circles of ripples appeared and there were slight distortions. That scene was like the explosion of a star. With such a huge commotion, even the residents of Chariot King Town were startled awake. They thought that a storm was coming and thunder was rumbling. Each of them had lingering fears. Only the demons, angels, and fallen angels who stayed behind to guard Chariot King Town noticed that something was wrong and began to stir. After the demons, angels, and fallen angels left behind to guard Chariot King Town, the huge commotion in the sky gradually subsided. The bow of light in Noah's hand gradually dissipated. The sturdy chains of light also turned into halos and disappeared. Raising his eyes, Noah stared ahead and muttered to himself, "That's right. It's really quite tough." Taking a closer look in front of Noah, at the location of the explosion, Glendale's figure reappeared in the air. However, the scales on the gigantic evil dragon's body were almost completely shattered. Large amounts of blood spurted out from the skin underneath and dripped down continuously. Under the direct attack of the arrow of light, Glendale was heavily injured. However, Noah had already used all the divine power he could control in that attack. Logically speaking, even the Demon King and Dragon King wouldn't be able to withstand such an attack. Yet Glendale did. However, that evil dragon was already fatally injured. It would be difficult for it to even stand, right? Just as Noah was thinking, the heavily injured Glendale slowly raised its drooping head. What? The scales on the evil dragon's face were all shattered and covered in green blood. However, it didn't seem to feel anything. The corner of its mouth twitched and revealed an extremely sinister and joyful smile. Aren't you quite capable? Human brat. Glendale ignored the injuries all over its body and twisted its neck with a joyful expression. Noah couldn't help but be stunned when he saw that. "Didn't I say so?" Drake's voice became heavy. "That guy is a lunatic. If we don't beat him to a pulp, no matter how serious his injuries are, he will stand up as if nothing happened. In his mind, pain is not a problem at all. It is like a stimulant, making his emotions more and more excited." That was why Glendale was an evil dragon. An evil dragon with an abnormal mind that only thought about fighting. No one would dare to let it cause trouble. That was why Glendale had long been dismembered and destroyed. However, Glendale didn't seem to care about Drake's words. "I already said that it doesn't matter. What's important is to continue the fight. Beat him viciously. That's the most important thing." "Are you trying to crush me to pieces?" Glendale laughed. "Then hurry up and do it." Noah finally understood why Drake hated Glendale so much. It wasn't just because Glendale was a lunatic. It was also because this guy was annoying and troublesome. Thus, Noah's eyes flashed with a sharp light. "Do you really want to be smashed to pieces? Then I'll fulfill your wish." The divine power that was circulating in an orderly manner in Noah's body suddenly turned into magic power. Clang! A huge magic formation unfolded in front of Noah. An astonishing amount of magic power surged into the magic formation like a tidal wave, causing it to emit a blinding light. Bang! Like the sound of a cannon, a beam of magic power shot out from the magic formation like an arrow piercing through the night sky, heading straight for Glendale. "You're playing this trick again? Bastard! Use your fists. What I want is to kill. Kill!" Glendale roared with extreme dissatisfaction. He didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he raised his fist and punched out a punch that could shatter mountains and rivers towards the gigantic magic beam that was shooting towards him. In the next second, the huge beam of magic power and the huge fist collided. However, the collision didn't cause any strange sounds. The instant Glendale's fist came into contact with the magical beam, it was as though it was neatly sliced apart. Lines extended out from it. What? Glendale was shocked. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to be shocked. The beam of magic power landed on Glendale's body and turned into a brilliant white light, enveloping Glendale's entire body. Amidst the radiance, Glendale's gigantic body was sliced apart. Lines extended out and divided into neatly arranged cubes. Bang! A muffled explosion sounded. Just like the declaration just now, Glendale's body shattered into pieces, and his whole body exploded. Fresh blood splattered onto the ground. Chapter 1904. Thud! A huge head fell from the sky with a muffled thud, crashing heavily into an empty field in front of a factory in Chariot Town. Soon after, pieces of neatly arranged flesh fell from the sky along with a large amount of blood, stirring up a thick cloud of dust. Noah slowly descended from the sky and landed on the opposite side of the cloud of dust. He looked ahead, his body still rippling with powerful mana. Raising a hand, Noah slowly opened and closed his palm. As Noah moved, the mana in his hand turned into a dazzling white light, burning slowly like a flame. Noah smiled at the sight. Looks like the reappearance of Shatter has stabilized. There won't be any more problems. Shatter. It was a high-level destructive spell. It was also the mystery that Noah first obtained in his life. After becoming a godslayer, this spell was fused into Noah's authority, becoming one of the incarnations of Noah's authority. And now Noah had reappeared it. With mana. The source of a demon's mana was imagination. Only by infusing it with imagined mana would it become a physical power. If one imagined fire, mana would become fire. If one imagined water, mana would become water. If one imagined wind, mana would become wind. If one imagined lightning, mana would become lightning. Demons could only unleash their power through all kinds of imagination, allowing their mana to materialize what they imagined. But that did not mean that they could materialize their power through imagination alone. Otherwise, demons would have become synonymous with having their wishes come true. Putting aside the fact that the more powerful a spell was, the more mana it would need to consume, just imagine whether one could smoothly inject mana, what aspect of mana one was good at, one's talent in mana, and so on. All of these factors would become the foundation of mana exerting its power. For example, Leah's bloodline had the trait of destruction, allowing her to infuse her imagination of destruction into her mana very smoothly, unleashing the power of destruction. Other demons did not have such a bloodline. Even if they could imagine destruction, they would not be able to infuse it into their mana and unleash its destructive power. Saratog did not awaken the power of destruction at all, nor did he have any talent in mana. The mana in his body was pitifully small, or even none at all, and could not use the power of destruction successfully. It was clear that in terms of destruction it was not just bloodline, but talent was also a decisive factor. Which aspect of mana one was good at would determine the power of their mana. For example, Junai was most proficient in Thunder Attribute magic power. If he used Thunder Attribute magic power, his power would be extremely strong. Although he could also use other types of magic power, their power was relatively weak and could hardly be of help in battle. It was the same for Laybell. As the heir of the Phoenix bloodline, her fire mana was infinitely powerful, and she could not use other types of mana apart from fire mana. That was why even though demons' mana could be unleashed with their imagination alone, it did not mean that they could do anything. Some were good at controlling flames. Some were good at controlling lightning. Some were good at controlling water, some were good at controlling wind. In short, apart from factors such as bloodline and talent, if a demon wanted to unleash the power of their mana, whether they could successfully imagine and infuse it into their imagination would determine whether they could use that type of mana. When Noah used his demonic mana, he could successfully conjure wind, fire, thunder, water, and other attributes, but the power was barely satisfactory. As a result, in an experiment, Noah found that when he used his mana to recreate the crush he had used before, the power was incredibly great. In other words, Noah's talent in mana was just like Lyatha's destruction, Junai's lightning, and Laybell's flames. It was all in the aspect of crush. That was to be expected. The source of mana was imagination. For the user, if something left an indelible impression in their mind, it would naturally be easier to imagine it. And for a person who pursued power, it was clear how deep of an impression the first use of power could leave. Not to mention, Noah had once honed himself in the deep mountains and forests for 4 years in order to learn crush. The impression was even more difficult to erase. Hence, the embodiment of Noah's magic power was completely in the aspect of shattering. However, the power to crush everything was already the same as Lyatha's destruction. It belonged to the domain that only demons with special bloodlines could use. Therefore, after the first recreation, Noah could no longer use crush successfully with his demonic mana. In this case, Noah simply added the characteristics of the demon's magic power to his own magic power, just like how he added the characteristics of the power of light to his divine power. He used his magic power to imagine, recreate, and shatter it. As a result, he succeeded in one fell swoop. Perhaps it was also because Noah had used his own mana to cast crush in the past, so he was very clear about how to use it. That was why he was able to succeed. Let divine power have the characteristics of the power of light, and be able to be shaped. Let his own mana have the characteristics of the demon's mana and recreate crush. Let the energy in his body have the characteristics of strengthening magic, so that strengthening magic would become eternal. These 3 results were Noah's gains for more than a month. At this point, Noah could reach a 4-digit level just by relying on himself. If he used the forbidden hand of the Divine Vanquisher or the power of 2 elven devices, he could even stand shoulder to shoulder with the top 10 champions in the world. The gains were not small. Of course, compared to when he had authority, sovereignty, and ability value, he could reach 2 digits in his heyday. This level of gain was nothing. However, if the opponent was a human, the increase in strength, no matter how much, was good. And if the opponent was not a human, with the power of 2 another cosmology, he could completely make up for the lack of authority, sovereignty, and ability value. It did not matter at all. In view of this, Noah's gains were still great. In fact, apart from the above 3 gains, Noah also had another gain in the past month. However, using that power to deal with Glendale was a bit of a fuss. No matter what, this is the end. Noah retracted his mana and glanced at the scene in the dust that was gradually settling down. Looking at the neatly cut pieces of the evil dragon's body into cubes by the power of crush, he smirked. "As you wish, I've crushed your bones. I hope you're satisfied." Saying so, Noah was about to turn around and leave, when a burst of disgusting laughter sounded again. "You actually did it. Undoubtedly, it's just a human. Not bad. Noah's figure suddenly froze, and he couldn't help but show a stunned expression on his face. In front of him, in the pile of minced meat, Glendale, who only had a head left, acted as if nothing had happened. He vomited blood and laughed loudly. I want to fight again. I want to fight again. But I can't do anything without a body. Forget it. Anyway, as long as my soul is fine, I can always make a new body. I'll fight to my heart's content then. Ha 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 ha. Looking at Glendale's spirited appearance, Noah's expression finally sank. Hey Drake. Noah said softly. That evil dragon's vitality is so strong that it can survive with only its head left? No, there's no such thing. Drake seemed to be very surprised. Even if it doesn't take the pain seriously, it's already more than that. The previous Glendale didn't have such vitality. Noah's brows furrowed and his frown deepened. At this moment, a magic circle appeared beside Glendale's shattered body. Inside the magic array, a man in a black robe slowly walked out of the magic array. It was impossible to see his face clearly. The sudden appearance of the black-robed person caused Noah to turn his gaze to the other party, his eyes gradually narrowing. Although he couldn't see the other party's appearance clearly, and the other party's aura was very unfamiliar, Noah felt a magical power from the other party. The magical power of a demon. The black-robed person in front of him was undoubtedly a demon. Chapter 1905. As expected, the black-robed figure slowly walked out of the magic circle and saw Glendale's shattered body. He sighed. I knew it. With such a huge commotion, it must be you who went on a rampage. Hey, you can't blame me for this. Glendale continued to laugh. I just noticed an enemy attack, so I came out to face them. It was obvious that Glendale was in cahoots with the mysterious devil. However, the black-robed man spoke in a tone as if he was talking to himself about something. Don't use that kind of excuse anymore. It's not smart and not convincing at all. After all, you are just an evil dragon with an empty mind. You don't think about anything other than fighting. What's wrong with fighting? Glendale laughed sinisterly. Only the passion of battle can prove that I'm alive. But if you go overboard, it won't do us any good, the black-robed figure said calmly. Our mission is to investigate the Godslayer who is said to be living in this town. That person is the only variable in our plan, so we have to investigate thoroughly. Hearing the black-robed figure's words, Noah's eyes suddenly shone. I see. Are these guys here for me as well? Unfortunately, they didn't seem to know that the person they were investigating was right in front of them. Perhaps the black-robed figure didn't put a human in his eyes and ignored Noah's existence. That was why he was talking to himself without a care in the world. As for Glendale, that guy wouldn't think about anything other than fighting. He probably didn't even think about who Noah was. As long as he could enjoy himself, it didn't matter. With that thought in mind, Noah looked at the black-robed figure and spoke. You are from the disaster squad, right? When Noah spoke, the black-robed figure seemed to have finally noticed Noah's existence. He turned around and looked at Noah with interest. You are the one who turned Glendale into this? You are a human, right? Aren't you going to answer with a question? Noah said with a half-smile. But even if you don't say anything, we can basically guess your identity. It's useless to deny it. Now, other than the disaster squad, no one will come to this town to do anything sneaky. Sorry, we didn't do anything shameful. We just want to say hello to the Godslayer in this town, the black-robed figure said. But you're right. Now, all the mythical forces have started to cooperate and reached an agreement to not invade each other. Except for the vampires. But the vampires are also considered to be neutral. Only the disaster squad is clearly standing on the opposite side of all the forces. It's not difficult to guess who we are. In other words, the black-robed figure was. What a surprise. Noah laughed in spite of himself. Originally, I thought that after losing the two biggest factions, the Demon King faction and the Hero faction, the group of Calamity would be greatly weakened and wouldn't dare to be so arrogant for a short period of time. I didn't expect that after only a month, you can't wait to take action again. Are you that keen on working as terrorists? Losing the Demon King faction and the Hero faction has indeed caused a serious loss to the Disaster Squad, but if it's just combat power, it can be replenished at any time. The black-robed figure shrugged. Just like the evil dragon you see now, we have successfully resurrected him. Next, we only need to resurrect the evil dragons that have been destroyed in the past one by one. The vacancy of the Demon King faction and the Hero faction can be completely filled. There is no impact at all. How did you do it? Noah stared at the black-robed figure closely. The disaster squad already has the technology to resurrect the dead? As long as the soul is still there, it's not difficult to do things like resurrection. Basically, every mythical power has more or less mastered some resurrection techniques. After all, they all have gods. The black-robed man spoke with assurance. However, no matter which faction it is, they can't completely resurrect the dead. For example, the God of the Bible and the 4 old demon kings are examples that can't be resurrected. But we did it, although we are still adjusting it. Hearing that, before Noah could speak, Glendale grumbled in a disgruntled manner. I told you. Don't worry about that kind of thing. Hurry up and make me another body. I want to beat that human up. The evil dragon's body can't be made just because you say so, especially when that is not in my hands. The black-robed figure didn't even look at Glendale and said so. If you want to recover your body, then go back first. I can't wait until then, Glendale shouted. Then his eyes that were filled with hostility turned to Noah. If that's the case, even if only my head is left, I want to fight to my heart's content. Let me see if I can crush your throat in this state. Only his head is left and he still wants to fight? Just like what Drake said, this guy is a complete lunatic. Being entangled by this kind of guy is really disgusting. Give up. The black-robed figure said the same thing. Even when you have a complete body, you can't beat an opponent. With your current state, even if you beat him to death, you can't win. Then let's beat him to death, Glendale said as if it was a matter of fact. That's more satisfying, isn't it? If that's what you want to do, then I won't stop you. The black-robed figure glanced at Glendale, and his tone became cold. But I hope you don't forget that you are still in the adjustment stage. If you continue to mess around, I don't know if you can be resurrected next time. How boring. Glendale was silent for a moment, and then smacked his lips in dissatisfaction. I know. I admit defeat, all right? Then hurry back and change your body, the black-robed figure said decisively. The next battle will be the highlight. With that said, the black-robed man snapped his fingers and a teleportation circle flickered beneath Glendale's head. Hey, that human over there. Glendale glared at Noah fiercely. Don't think that you've won. Even if I'm smashed to pieces, as long as I can still fight, I'll beat you to a pulp sooner or later. Don't die too quickly. The one who can kill you should be me. After saying that, Glendale's body was shrouded by the light from the teleportation circle. Noah quietly watched as Glendale disappeared into the teleportation circle. He didn't make a move, nor did he stop him, which surprised the black-robed figure. I thought you would stop him. If I can make that disgusting bastard disappear, I don't mind doing so, Noah said indifferently. But since you have mastered the technique to resurrect life, even if I stop and kill him, he will be resurrected sooner or later. If that's the case, it doesn't matter if I stop him or not, right? A very clear judgment. The black-robed figure clapped his hands in praise. As expected of the Godslayer that all mythical factions fear. Noah raised an eyebrow. It seemed that the black-robed figure had finally noticed his true identity. However, it wasn't hard to guess. To be able to crush a Dragon King-class evil dragon with a wave of his hand, and to be a human in this town, only the Godslayer could fulfill these conditions. At this moment, the black-robed figure slowly took off his hood. A young man appeared under the hood. A young man with silver hair as pure as moonlight. The young man introduced himself. I am Euclid Lucifer Gus. Lucifer Gus. Noah was stunned. He seemed to have heard this name somewhere before. Moreover, Noah always felt that he had seen the appearance of the young man who claimed to be Euclid Lucifergus somewhere before. While Noah was still in a daze, the young man Euclid said, "The purpose of coming to this town was to see how powerful you are. But now, it seems that Glendale alone is not enough to test your true strength. However, we will prepare a stage for another battle with you. Let's meet again in the territory of the vampires." After saying that, Euclid returned to the teleportation circle that had been there since the beginning and slowly disappeared on the spot. Looking at Euclid's departure, Noah fell into silence. Chapter 1906. Evil Dragon? In the Paranormal Research Department's office, Asashel looked at Noah, who was sitting opposite him in shock. The massive calamity actually revived that thing? The battle between Noah and Glendale had alarmed the demons, angels and fallen angels who stayed behind in Colt King Town. It was only after Euclid and Glendale had left that the Jumanli's kin rushed over. After that, Noah contacted Asashel and had him come here to tell him about the situation. Therefore, apart from Asashel, the Jumanli's kin were also present. Evil Dragon, Lyeth said as if she had a headache. I didn't expect that a legendary dragon would appear in my territory. This is really unsettling. Glendale, the evil dragon that was destroyed by the famous Norse hero Beowulf. Zhu Nai's expression became troubled. If we were to face an enemy of that level, I'm afraid we'd be in trouble. In the past, when Glendale was still alive, many heroes were killed by that evil dragon. It was only when Lord Beowulf intervened that the dragon was annihilated, Losvias said. That's a famous dragon that was recorded in the ancient books of Norse. It was said that it was completely destroyed, and logically speaking, there shouldn't be any possibility of it being revived. It's because it can do that it's scary, Yudu said solemnly. If the massive calamity can revive a target that was completely destroyed, perhaps the other evil dragons have been revived as well. I heard that among the evil dragons, the most powerful and famous ones are the Celtic clan Kuvok, the Persian Dahaka, and the Hindu Apophis. Rebel's face was filled with unease. Don't tell me that even those evil dragons have been revived? I can't refute that. Kitten lowered her head with a rare solemn expression. But I didn't sense the presence of any other evil dragon other than Glendale. The Jumanli's kin were able to find Noah immediately because Kitten had sensed the evil dragon's presence. However, Euclid seemed to have made preparations beforehand and set up a barrier around Glendale to prevent the transfer spell from being activated. That was why Kitten could not immediately summon the Jumanli's kin to the scene even though she had sensed the evil dragon's presence in advance. She only arrived after Euclid and Glendale had left. Are there still that many dangerous dragons? They're all dragons that even those who haven't read the Bible are familiar with. Although there are no other mythical dragons in the Bible, Isha, Genova, and Irina hid in a corner and whispered to each other. Their expressions were not as solemn as the others. Only Gasper, who had always been timid, had a look of fear on his face. He was just short of running away. All right, you don't have to worry so much, Noah said comfortingly. The resurrection of the evil dragon is no doubt bad news. But even if the sky falls, we'll be here to hold it up. You guys are still young, and it's too early to think about fighting against a Dragon King level evil dragon and a legendary level demonic dragon. What? Riaz said rather awkwardly. Undoubtedly, Master is only a few years older than us. You guys are just looking for trouble if you compare yourself to him. Athasher smiled bitterly. Among all the mythical influences in the world, those with high authority have lived for at least tens of thousands of years. Even your elder brother, who is a demon lord, is merely a kid who has lived for several thousand years in their eyes. In the end, even those Asura gods and Buddhas are extremely fearful of your teacher. Compared to him, you're just asking for trouble. He is the only exception in the world. However, Noah is right. You guys are just young people who haven't even graduated from high school. You guys belong to the new generation in the demon realm. Although each of you is very outstanding, it's still too early to think about fighting against a Dragon King level existence. Athasher waved his hand. Every Dragon King level existence is at least comparable to a Demon King. Even I don't have the confidence to win against them. You guys who have participated in the battle against the evil god Loki should know how dangerous it is. If you meet them, you must not fight them. Do you understand? The Jumangli's subordinates looked at each other in dismay before nodding helplessly. Noah and Athasher's expressions relaxed a little. Compared to the evil dragon, I'm actually more concerned about something else. Athasher stroked his chin. That Euclid guy told you to see you in the territory of the vampires, right? What does that mean? I'm not sure. Noah knocked on the table and narrowed his eyes. However, it has to be the vampires. I have a bad feeling about this. The vampires were a very ancient race. and had a class system very similar to that of the demons. They were existences that could only live in the darkness, and they valued bloodline and status very much. Just like how there were pure-blooded demon families among the demons, the vampires were also led by nobles. Although the vampires' territory also had a modern lifestyle because they had absorbed many new vampires from the modern era, the nobles with noble bloodlines seemed to have maintained a medieval lifestyle. This was very similar to the demons. The demons had also absorbed many reincarnated demons, and their lifestyle had greatly improved. They had modern high-rise buildings and medieval castles. It was very incredible. The difference was that the demons lived in the underworld, while the vampires lived in a corner of the human world. However, this race had always maintained a certain distance from the other forces. The vampires valued bloodline more than any other race. This race that lived by blood was also more xenophobic than any other force. They were extremely repulsed to come into contact with other non-human beings, and lived according to their own values. They had no intention of coming into contact with other forces at all. To put it nicely, they were conservative. To put it bluntly, they were too arrogant and did not care about the existence of other races. Therefore, even if all the mythical forces in the world had reached an agreement and cooperated with each other, the vampires were still stubbornly sticking to their views, and had no intention of coming into contact with other forces. Perhaps the vampires have their own reasons for this? Athaziel sighed. After all, the vampires have always been in internal strife since hundreds of years ago. It was said that hundreds of years ago the vampires had a huge rupture. From then on, the vampires were divided into two factions. One was the male Tsepeshi faction. The other was the female Camilla faction. These two factions had always been in conflict since hundreds of years ago, and until now there had been no conclusion. Could it be that the vampires are already in cahoots with the disaster squad? Laybell raised her hand. The vampires have always been stubbornly sticking to their own views and not coming into contact with us. Is it possible that they have already joined forces with the disaster squad? The one who answered this question was none other than Gasper. I don't think that's possible. Gasper mustered up his courage and said, "The vampires value bloodline very much, and even mixed bloods will be looked down upon by them. The disaster squad has humans, demons, fallen angels, and all kinds of other races. With the vampires' values, it's impossible to come into contact with them." These words, coming from Gasper, who was both a vampire and a mixed blood, was undoubtedly very convincing. "I don't think the vampires have joined forces with the disaster squad either," Leah said. "If that's the case, the vampires will try to come into contact with us. If they can get on this side, it will undoubtedly be more beneficial for the disaster squad, right? That would be the so-called traitor." Noah had also considered these questions. "It's just that I have a feeling that things are not as simple as we think." Noah shook his head. "No matter what, Athaziel, I think we need to go to the vampire's territory in advance." Asashel nodded his head heavily. At this time, a communication magic circle opened up beside Athaziel's ear. After a while, Athaziel stood up in surprise. "The vampires plan to talk to us?" Athaziel's words stunned everyone, including Noah. Chapter 1907. The next day, as usual, Noah lived his life as a teacher in the Colt King Academy. After school, he brought the Gemins into the training space for special training as usual. He only brought Orpheus back to the apartment after dark. When it was late at night, Noah asked Aster and Athena to accompany Orpheus while he went out and returned to the school. He went to the Supernatural Research Department's office. Every member of the Jamanli family was present. Asashel was also present. Except for Laius and Asashel, who were sitting on the sofa in the office, everyone else stood behind the sofa. The atmosphere in the air was somewhat heavy. The people present did not talk as unbridled as before. Instead, it was as if they deliberately lowered their voices and whispered to each other. Even Laius and Asashel were affected by the atmosphere and did not speak. They just sat there with their eyes closed, as if waiting for something. In such an atmosphere, Noah's arrival seemed to have broken the silence and attracted everyone's attention. No one spoke. However, Noah's arrival clearly eased everyone's expression a little. "Okay." Asashel finally spoke. "Since even the Godslayer is here, no matter what the vampire's purpose is, They won't be able to cause any trouble in front of this guy, right? Yesterday, the vampires who had been showing a clear refusal to the other forces suddenly contacted the demons, angels and fallen angels, indicating that they wanted to have a meeting. Moreover, the target was not any of the leaders of the demons, angels and fallen angels but Laius. This matter caused great confusion and doubt to the demons, angels and fallen angels, and it also shocked the Gemins. Although Laius was the next leader of the Gemins were at best just one of the pure-blooded demon families in the demon realm. Their status was not high enough to represent the demon realm to talk to the other forces. Under such circumstances, it was really inconceivable that the vampires, who had been refusing contact before, suddenly wanted to have a meeting with Laius. Moreover, the vampires did not seem to be targeting the Gemins, but Laius herself. Therefore, there was no doubt that this meeting definitely contained information that others were unaware of. In this regard, the demons, angels and fallen angels even held a meeting and finally decided to accept the talks with the vampires. Still, it was worrying to have only Leah's and the Zamanli's kin talk to the vampires. Thus, Asashel volunteered to participate in this discussion as the guardian representative of the Zamanli family. Noah, on the other hand, was a witness to the negotiations. Naturally, he had a legitimate reason to stay. As for the time of the meeting, the vampires expressed that the sooner the better, and directly set it for the next night. The location was none other than the Supernatural Research Society of the Full King Academy. Listen up, little ones. Noah's eyes fell on the Zamanli's kin who were standing behind Laius as he instructed them. Later on, no matter what the other party says, none of you are allowed to interrupt, in case the other party makes use of you or has something that can be used against you. Do you understand? The group of Jimenez nodded in agreement. Only Gasper had a complicated expression on his face. Vampires were a race that placed great emphasis on bloodlines and viewed humans as prey and bait. For vampires who valued bloodlines, mixed bloods were naturally the most lowly existences. One could only imagine what kind of treatment Gasper had suffered in the past. Leah's had secretly told Noah that Gasper had escaped from the vampire's territory and was unfortunately discovered by the church's exorcist, who almost killed him. Leah's, who had discovered Gasper, used a demonic pawn when Gasper was on the verge of death and reincarnated him into a demon, making him one of her own kin. This timid and slender young man had lived quite a hard life in the past, and all of this was thanks to the vampires. That was why Gasper was so resistant to going to the vampire's territory. Now, under unexpected circumstances, he had to meet the person in charge of the vampires face to face. It was not hard to imagine how Gasper's mood was. To be honest, it was not an exaggeration to say that the vampire's values were the worst in the eyes of humans and kind-hearted people. Noah also did not have any good feelings about this race. However, Noah would not point fingers at other people's lifestyles. That was just putting his values into other people's values. Therefore, Noah only said this to Gasper. If you want to leave, it's not too late. That one sentence made everyone look at Gasper. Gasper, Leah said gently, don't force yourself, it's okay. It's okay. Gasper shook his head and mustered his courage. Compared to hiding in the room alone, I'd rather be with everyone, even if we're facing vampires. This wasn't unreasonable. Then you can watch from the side. Noah nodded. Maybe the other party will choose to meet with Leah's, and it might have something to do with you. After leaving such a seemingly persuasive sentence, Noah sat down beside Leah's. After all, the other party asked to talk to Leah's. Therefore, Noah and Asashel both sat beside Leah's as people related to her. Until a certain moment, a strange feeling began to spread throughout the entire space, and everyone's spirits were lifted. Here it comes. Leah subconsciously wanted to stand up. However, Noah and Asashel pressed Leah's shoulder at the same time. Don't overreact. Asashel patted Leah's shoulder. It's just the beginning. You're the main person of the meeting. There's no reason for you to stand up and greet him. Noah pursed his lips and turned his gaze to Yudu. Yudu, go and greet the guest. Understood. Yudu nodded and immediately walked out of the office. The atmosphere in the office became even more tense. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. Yudu opened the door with impeccable etiquette and allowed the guest to slowly walk in from outside. Everyone's eyes were immediately attracted to the guest. It was because the person who came in was too eye-catching. It was a young girl wearing a medieval princess dress. The girl had a delicate face and wavy blonde hair. Her figure was petite, and her eyes were as red as blood. She looked like a delicate puppet, giving off an unusual sense of beauty. Rather than saying that his skin was white, it would be more accurate to say that it was pale. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old, about the same age as the Jimenez's family. Behind the girl there was a man and a woman. The man and woman seemed to be just followers, but their skin was also terrifyingly pale, just like the dead, and their bodies were fluctuating with an indescribable sense of coldness. They were pure-blooded vampires. Compared to Gasper, who felt human, they seemed to be a race that did not fit in with humans. The leading vampire girl took a step forward, lifted the hem of her dress, and bowed like a noble. "I'm Elmaine Shelton Gerstein, you can call me Elmaine." The vampire girl's voice was very pleasing to the ears, and her tone was quite polite, but it made everyone present feel a sense of superiority. That kind of feeling, although not to the extent of causing disgust, made people subconsciously think that the visitor was not friendly. "Gerstein." A satchel stroked his chin. "I remember, he seems to be the highest noble in the Camilla faction, one of the two major vampire clans, right? In other words, he was the noblest pure-blooded descendant of the vampires, other than the Opesh and Camilla factions." Liaz nodded and turned her gaze to Elmaine. "Although there are many things I want to ask before that, please have a seat." Elmaine nodded and sat down opposite Liaz. Chapter 1908. Before we start the meeting, there is one thing I want to ask first. It's related to whether the next topic can be carried out smoothly. As soon as he sat down, Elmaine Scherzding immediately spoke. Moreover, as soon as he opened his mouth, everyone was taken aback. "Someone among us vampires has become the host of the Divine Annihilation Tool. Do you already know this news?" "What?" Asa Schurz was the first to react and almost stood up in surprise. "A vampire has become the host of the Divine Annihilation Tool? It seems that you haven't received the news yet." Elmaine Scherzding seemed to have confirmed this matter and said to himself, "However, that's not surprising. Recently, you have been focusing on the peace talks between the major forces and haven't received any information from us." Hearing that, Asa Schurz put away his shocked expression and faintly showed some regret. Indeed, recently Asa Schurz has been busy with the peace talks between the major forces and relaxed a lot about the vampires. Asa Schurz was prepared to go to the vampires' territory again after the event. He didn't expect that with this relaxation. He didn't even get such important information. If it was Noah, he would also feel very annoyed, right? However, after a while, Asa Schurz took a deep breath and calmly spoke. "Did the vampire get the Sephiroth's cup, or the Telos Karma?" There were a total of 13 types of divine annihilation tools. According to the ranking, the 13 types of divine annihilation tools, from high to low, were True Longinus, Brilliant Thunder Prison, Zenith Tempest, Annihilation Maker, Dimension Lost, Sephiroth's Cup, Red Dragon Emperor's Boosted Gear, White Dragon Emperor's Light Wings, Divine Dividing, Lion King's Battle Axe, Regulus Nemia, Innovation Clear, Eternal Ice Maiden, Absolute Damage, Incinerate Anthem of the Purple Flame Sacrificial Lord, Black Blade's Dog God Canis Lycaon, Telos Karma. At this time, when all the major powers had reached an agreement, the whereabouts of 10 types of god extermination tools had been confirmed. The demons had the Lion King's Axe, Regulus Nemia. The angels had the Brilliant Thunder Prison, Zenith Tempest. The fallen angels had the Black Blade Canis Lycaon. On the human side, there was a magic association that had the Absolute Damage. The captured heroes had True Longinus, Annihilation Maker, and Dimension Lost. In a group of magicians that kept a distance from the three major forces of demons, angels and fallen angels, and was regarded as dangerous and lawless by many magicians, there was the Incinerate Anthem of the Purple Flame Ritual Master. As for the Red Dragon Emperor's Boosted Gear and White Dragon Emperor's Light Wings, Divine Dividing, these two god extermination tools were in the hands of Noah and Wally, respectively. As for the remaining Sephiroth's Cup, Innovate Clear and Telos Karma, their whereabouts were still unknown. Their whereabouts had yet to be confirmed. It was said that the current demon king Beelzebub, Achuka, who was also a surpasser like Syzax, seemed to have obtained the innovation clear and was researching it. However, whether this news was true or false had not been confirmed. As for the Sephiroth's cup and the Telos Karma, there wasn't even the slightest bit of information about them. If the vampires had a God's End relic, then it could only be one of the Sephiroth's cup and the Telos Karma. Thus Elmine Shelton also answered. The God extermination tool in the possession of the vampires is Sephiroth's cup. Sephiroth's cup. Just as the true Longinus referred to the famous Lance of Longinus, the Sephiroth's cup referred to the famous Holy Grail. Really? Asashel couldn't help but mutter. The legendary holy relic actually fell into the hands of the vampires? We also think that this is a joke. After all, we have always been enemies with the church, Elmine Shelton said self-deprecatingly. As vampires, they actually went after the church's holy relic. This is the biggest joke. It wasn't just Elmine Shelton. Even Aisha, Genova, and Irina, the three former members of the church, had a complicated expression. In response, Asashel only said this. Since the vampires didn't give up on this holy relic and still keep it, then it proves that you want to use its power, right? Please don't joke around, okay? Elmine Shelton said with some disgust as if he was insulted. The Camilla faction is a noble clan of vampires. They would never pursue that kind of holy relic. It's not the Camilla faction that keeps the Sephiroth's cup, but the Zepesh faction. The Zepesh faction. Everyone looked at each other. Lyeth couldn't help but speak up. Since it's the Zepesh faction that owns the Sephiroth's cup, as members of the Camilla faction, why are you here? Our purpose is simple. Elmine Shelton looked up and turned to Gasper, who was behind Lyeth. In order to resist the power of the Zepesh faction that has obtained the divine relic, we, the Camilla faction, need a countermeasure, and that is Gasper Verratti. Huh. Gasper was stunned on the spot. The Jumanli's kin were also shocked. In other words, Asashel asked with an uncertain tone, you want to use Gasper's power to deal with the Zepesh faction? That's right. Elmine Shelton nodded. That's the purpose of our trip. No way. Lyeth rejected without even thinking about it. Gasper's divine relic is powerful, but it can't compare to the divine relic. You're sending Gasper to his death. However, Lyeth's words made Elmine Shelton frown deeply. What's wrong? Elmine Shelton couldn't help but blurt out. Don't you know the true power hidden in that mixed blood's body? The true power hidden in Gasper's body. Everyone was stunned. On the side, Noah's eyes flickered slightly. Chapter 1909. Everyone could understand Elmine Shelton's thoughts. The so-called God's extermination tool was just like its literal meaning. It was a tool that could exterminate even gods. Although having a divine annihilation tool did not mean that one could kill a god, at least with a divine annihilation tool, there was a slight possibility of killing a god. It was the same even if the user was a human. Cao Cao was the best example. The hero's descendant was very capable, and his comprehensive strength had even reached a 4-digit level. Even Noah had to use the divine annihilation tool before he gained a few gains over the past month and improved his strength greatly. Wally even forced Tyrannosaurus out. However, without the Holy Spear, no matter how capable Cao Cao was, he would be at the bottom of the 5-digit level at best, or even less than that. It was because of the Holy Spear that Cao Cao became the strongest human in this world, leading all the hero's descendants and heroes' descendants. His strength and means were not weak. Of course, to be able to fully unleash the power of the Holy Spear and even develop 7 different subtypes of divine annihilation tool, it was clear that Cao Cao himself also had extraordinary abilities. However, it was because of this that the power of the strongest divine annihilation tool was fully revealed, making people more aware of how unfair the divine annihilation tool was. The vampires began to have internal strife hundreds of years ago, and had been in a stalemate. The two factions, Capesh and Camilla, had never been able to determine a winner. Even if there was a difference in strength between them, there was definitely not much difference. However, the appearance of the divine annihilation tool could completely destroy this balance. With the power of the divine annihilation tool, the Capesh faction could definitely defeat the Camilla faction and gain true control of the vampires' world. Understanding this, the Camilla faction naturally had to think of ways to deal with the divine annihilation tool that destroyed the balance. That was why the Camilla faction took the initiative to propose a meeting. The reason why the target of the meeting was Lyath was also very simple. It was because they wanted to use the power of Lyath's kin, Gasper, who was once persecuted by the vampires, to deal with the Holy Grail. However, just like what Lyath said, although Gasper's divine artifact was very powerful, it was not to the point where it could rival the divine annihilation tool. Not to mention, the Holy Grail was ranked 5th among the gods' destruction artifacts. It was only below the top 4 gods' destruction artifacts. The Camilla faction was naturally aware of this. But Elmain Shelton still came for Gasper. The reason was because there was some kind of power hidden in Gasper's body. Not to mention the others, even Gasper himself didn't know about this matter. Because Gasper had long since been in a state of panic. My body has a hidden power? Gasper was at a loss. That kind of thing. How is that possible? Everyone, including Lias, who was Gasper's master, was at a loss. Seeing this, Elmain Shelton's crimson eyes flashed, and there was some pity in his eyes when he looked at Lias. So that's how it is. You don't know the truth about Gasper Verdi? If you knew, you wouldn't have accepted such a servant, right? What do you mean by that? Lias was getting a little angry. No matter what kind of power is hidden in Gasper's body, he is still my kin. I will never look down on him because of the so-called truth. Is that so? Elmain Shelton nodded a little dismissively. If that's the case, then let us return to the main topic. I still say the same thing. Please lend Gasper Verdi to us. We need his power to deal with the Saipesh faction. His tone was as if he was not talking about a person but an item. To Elmain Shelton, or the entire Camilla faction, what they were interested in was Gasper's hidden power, not Gasper himself. Understanding this point, everyone's face darkened. At this time, Elmain Shelton spoke again. Of course, we didn't come empty-handed. Elmain Shelton took a document from the vampire guard beside him, put it on the table, and pushed it in front of a satchel. Governor of the Fallen Angels, please take a look. Asashurs frowned slightly and took the document. After glancing through it a few times, his expression began to turn ugly. I see. For the first time, Asashel looked at Elmain Shelton with an extremely unhappy gaze. The peace agreement on the Camilla side. Are you going to use this in exchange for us to hand over Gasper? What? Everyone was taken aback. Peace agreement? Taking out a peace agreement in this situation? This was simply telling everyone that if Gasper was not handed over to the Camilla faction, then the vampires would not conclude